Yeah, we are live. Sangeeta, we are live.
वो देना मेरे earplugs मेरे यहाँ पे.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of ICOFORT, the National Scientific Committee of Comoros, India on Fortifications and Military Heritage is proud to welcome you all today, this evening, to the grand finale of our webinar series, which is to bring to you live and through presentations and through alliterations, the fortifications and military heritage across India. Through the few weeks before, on June 19th, we were talking about the Deccan fortresses, followed by the Western fortresses. And then we came to the Northern frontiers, the central strongholds, and the Northwestern frontiers. Today is the concluding and the grand finale here. And I also would like to share with you that we are a proud, strong team of the ICOFORT. And some of our members are also proud members of the International ISC, which is the International Scientific Committee on Forts and Military Heritations. And it is not only a matter of joy, but it is also a moment of happiness for us today that despite the preceding times and the current pandemic with which we are faced, yet we are able to celebrate the fortifications and bring them to you through our presenters. Over the past few weeks, most of them have been through members of ICOFORT, but we've also had some very knowledgeable and acclaimed professionals who have talked to us about the status, nature, and the type of fortifications and military heritage in the country. Today's webinar, the concluding one, consists of also the finale, which is talking about Assam, West Bengal, Andhra, and Telangana, which were the frontiers left. But we also have, as the pinnacle of the glory, a keynote presenter with us, Mr. Janhwij Sharma, who will talk to us about nothing less than the World Heritage view of fortifications, preferably in India, and also his view about where all he comes from, the Archaeological Survey of India. And he tells us more about the take of the ASI on the protection of such heritage monuments. So with this, I would like to bring to you the introduction to Janhwij. Most of us know Janhwij not only as a friend, but also as somebody whom we have known in the past. Janhwij is not a new name to us. A conservation architect by training, Janhwij holds the position of Joint Director General, Conservation World Heritage, Archaeological Survey of India. He joined the ASI in April 2008, and in the last 11 years, his prime responsibility has been to assist the DG ASI in finalizing conservation programs of all circles and monitoring conservation of ASI monuments within and outside the country. The major projects that he has recently implemented have been the Purana Killa and the site management plan of Taj Mahal under the directions of the Honorable Supreme Court. He has spearheaded conservation works outside India too, notably in Cambodia, where in the conservation of Ta Prohom Temple, a unique tree temple site, received acclaim from UNESCO. He is currently coordinating and monitoring the development of amenities being undertaken under the 100 Adarsh monuments, including the World Heritage ones. His most important contribution has been the formulation of a national policy for the conservation of protected monuments, archaeological sites and remains, which have been adopted by the Government of India in 2014. Currently, he's working towards the preparation for conservation manual. He's also assisting field officers in development conservation plans. He also holds the charge of National Culture Fund, which encourages partnerships with corporates for conservation and improvement of public amenities within monuments. Mr. Sharma has been in charge of World Heritage Matters on behalf of ASI for the past 7 years. During his tenure so far, 10 monuments and sites, including 3 of ASI's monuments, the Rani Ki Vav, hill forts of Rajasthan, the Nalanda Mahavira, have become World Heritage properties. Besides, he has guided, given technical support to a number of World Heritage related proposals from different ministries, state governments, local bodies. Mr. Sharma is also the member secretary of the Advisory Committee on World Heritage Matters. Today, we are happy and we are proud to bring Janhwij on this board with you to discuss the role of ASI and also his viewpoint on the management of forts and fortifications within the ambit of ASI. Welcome, Janhwij.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Do we need to start our videos or? Okay,
you would begin by sharing your screen, Janhwij.
Let me do that.
Yeah. So while Janhwij is doing that, let me also say a little more. He has published a wonderful book called Architectural Heritage Ladakh, published by Intech, and he has been lecturing extensively on conservation and World Heritage matters. He's an extensive architectural documenter on the monasteries in Ladakh and Zanskar. He's a keen traveler, and if you are his Facebook friend, then you would be knowing the wonderful images, the black and white pictures that he presents with you as his friend early morning when you open that up, because he does something amazing in the black and white photography of his travels. So he's writing here that he's an amateur architectural photographer, but I think he's being modest about that. Janhwij.
Thanks, Sangeeta. I think your introduction is longer than my presentation is.
Let's see.
No. But I think before I begin the presentation, I hope I'm audible to everyone, and the slides are, or the presentation is also visible to everyone. Before I begin, I thought I'll do a little bit of an acknowledgement kind of thing. I'll thank Shikha for giving this opportunity. Keynote address is a slightly dicey thing. I mean, we are normally used to giving presentations, but keynotes, and that too, I'm aware of the fact that this is last of the series, as Professor Sangeeta mentioned. Therefore, this keynote perhaps is not a keynote, but it is more a kind of a sum up. And perhaps the things or the images or the forts that I will be talking about is something that might have already been discussed in details, as I'm not privy to the previous presentations and discussions. So in case it's a repeat, I apologize. And Professor Sangeeta, thank you for your introduction. But I think I would also like to thank my colleagues from ASI, Professor Dr. Anil Tiwari, who's our Director Monument Antiquity. He gave me very interesting insights, and several of the superintendent archaeologists of the circles of Chennai, of Thrissur, Bangalore, Dharwad, Mumbai, Bhopal, Patna, Lucknow, because they gave me very interesting insights. And coincidentally, Sangeeta, when I was listening to your introduction and whatever you talked about me, there was not even a single mention of the forts. It was all about monasteries and Ladakh and all that. Anyways, because that's I have an understanding of this forts, but from the point of view of whatever works that we are doing. What I'm going to talk about, I think I'll give a little bit of theory behind it, but that's not a bookish theory. That's my experience of whatever I've traveled and I've seen around. I think I'll share my concerns. I've drawn a few points out of it. I will try to give some examples of the forts, and I've tried to include not the popular ones because we are, I'm sure, well aware of it, but I'll try to show a glimpse of those which are not normally talked about, but maybe you have already done that. I can't resist myself from talking about our stupendous works that we have done, both conservation and development related works at Red Fort in the past year and a half. So I thought I'll showcase that as an example before you. And obviously, we would look at this World Heritage aspect of these forts and where we stand, as of now, and what are the ways ahead. So I think this is the broad outline and the structure of my presentation. Now, I wonder why I'm. Right now, I think it's all about human instinct, right? It's all about shelter and protection, and the humankind, since times immemorial, is looking at the protection against wild animals, the vagaries of nature or the hostile climate, and as things progress, the clan rivalries, and that over the millennia only expanded in terms of scale and other technological complexities. So therefore, obviously, there was a natural propensity to safeguard your dwellings, to safeguard wherever your shelter was. And you would create these barriers by raising walls, by controlling the access to impede these advancements. Largely, the purpose of the forts or the fortification that is provided is either you're looking at providing a shelter, you're having a watch over a larger territory or the invading armies, the prevention of attacks and invasion. It helps you provide security or protection during war times, and also during the not only the times of conflict but also the times of disaster. There's an aspect of territorial control, and then that leads to the sophistication in the military engineering for effective defense. And later it also became a security cordon for the luxurious palaces, like, for example, Red Fort. Now, earliest literary references that we talk about, for example, Rigved talks about the forts which are made of stone or metal. Yajurved Samhita talks about the Mahapur or the great fortress. Upanishads have several references to Pura or Mahapura. Parini's Ashtadhyayi also talks about the Prakara, the Parikh, and the Dwar, the rampant, the moat, and the gate, respectively, which are all attributes or elements of a fort, not only of fort, but also of temples. For example, if we were to look at, say, the Brideshwara temple in Tanjore, all these elements are present. So it's a sort of a fortified kind of a temple. But the most elaborate description of fort and its types and subtypes is what is given in the Arth Shastra by Kautilya. And he talks about, that is something, and he talks about these 6 or 7 important types of forts. The Jaladurg or the water fort and its subtypes as the Antardweep Durg, Sthaladurg, then the Marudurg or the desert fort, which is surrounded by a sort of a large arid area, the Giridurg or the hill forts. Again, it has several subtypes to it, such as Prantar Durg, Giri Parshav Durg, Guha Durg, the Van Durg or the forest fort, which is surrounded, obviously, as the name suggests, by a dense forestation, the Mahidurg or the earthen fort, which were perhaps the earliest examples of the fortification. Again, it has several 2 or 3 subtypes as the Mridurg, the Parigadurg, and the Pankadurg, and largely the forts within the settlements, the human forts or the Nridurg, which were basically located within a city. So I thought that this, I would build up a context by sort of using this literary reference to it. Now, as the fort chronology goes in India, we are actually looking at a much wider cross-section. Somehow, when we talk about forts, usually there are references to medieval forts or even the later colonial forts of Dutch, Portuguese, and British. But if we look at our, fort architecture or fortifications, their examples go back to Harappan period. Neolithic period, we don't have any example in India, or for that matter in Indian subcontinent. The nearest example that one can think of is basically Jermo or Jericho, which is in the present day sort of area of Palestine, wherein this fortified settlement goes back to about 10,000 BCE. However, in our context, from Harappan period onwards, we actually see references to fortifications, that are provided to the citadel or the palace areas or to the settlement towns, and therefore there's, I'm sure you would have done this exercise, in a much greater detail, but the forts, if you see, has a huge regional variation, and it's largely guided by the terrain typologies and the subtypologies and the intermixture of the two, and then the functional variations of these forts, whether these are for royal palaces or the fortified settlements. These are control points for entry exit to a city. So there's or these are posts for controlling trade and goods collection, movement of goods, the tax collection points, and then of course the defense or military strategy vantage points. So there are n number of functions that these perform. I can't help but talk about Himalayas, right? I thought I'll start with this image of the Himalayas. It's a sort of a natural barrier or a wall which is about 4,000 kilometers, and towards the western part of Himalaya, it is deeper. It's more than 1,000 kilometer deep. Now, it is believed that this natural barrier or the natural wall, and if I may use this word euphemistically, the natural fortification, has actually, it is believed that it has led to the prevention of many an invasion or attacks because of the inhospitable terrain, and it was almost impenetrable in those days. Not that it stopped any invasions, because invasions did happen through west, but Himalayas are believed to provide you that sort of line of defense. And what is more interesting is that sometimes you get these very interesting rock features which have a fort-like countenance, and this particular sort of the almost turret-like structures that you see growing out of the rocks, very interesting formation caused out of the wind and the snow erosion, and as you're sort of walking or driving through it, they're almost intimidatingly as if they're kind of watching you. So I just thought I'll show some of these examples to you. Dholavira comes to my mind, as and when, because we are talking about the fortification. You look at the site plan, and I'm just putting my cursor across. This is the citadel area, which has, if you see these dark, thick walls, which are the fortification walls, and then you have the middle town, which has a fortification around it, and this citadel has a number of water reservoirs, because Dholavira is known for its water management system, which has been studied in greater detail. And therefore, you have a larger fortification which sort of covers this entire Dholavira settlement. Now, we don't know whether these fortifications, the multiple level of fortifications that were created to prevent any invasions or war, or whether it was sort of just controlling a certain territory. Anyways, but this is this site, which goes back 2600 BC to about 1700 BC, gives us, in my opinion, in the Indian subcontinent, one of the earliest references to the fortification in this part of the world. Interestingly, this year we have submitted the excavated remains of Dholavira as the World Heritage nomination. We expect ICOMOS to visit us sometime in 2nd or 3rd week of September, and we are very hopeful that this site should be on the World Heritage list the following year. Another, I thought, given so these are the photographs of the citadel area. So this is the this is the southeast bastion of the citadel, these thick cross-section wall, and these are the tapering walls of that fortification. And if you see this particular image, which is so the fortification has a gate on all sides, one on each side within the middle of it, and each gate if you look at its architecture, it seems to be a well guarded one, because there are these chambers over here where the soldiers or the gatekeepers must have sat to control the movement, and that's the flight of steps that actually takes you to the upper level of the fort. And this is a fort which is believed to have 7 levels of continuous occupation for about 800 or 900 years. And as I said, an exceptional example. Another example that came to my mind was the Surkotada Harappan site, which is also in Gujarat, wherein again, if you look at the Google image, you see the remains of the fortification, and this is the citadel area, and this fortification continues over here where my cursor is, and then you have the remains of the lower town over there. And on the right hand side, this bastion that you see here is basically this corner bastion, and this fortification wall that you see is this western side, this fortification wall. So we get our references to fortifications and forts, in fact, much earlier. Therefore, Chhattisgarh, as the name suggests, obviously means 30. It's a land which comprises 36 forts. This particular fort, Malhar, caught my attention because of its very interesting planning and layout. It's basically a circular fort which is surrounded by a moat. So it's example of a Sthal fort, but it is the double moat. So you can see one moat which is here, and there is another moat that you can see where my cursor is at the moment. So these are 2 moats, and then you have the fortification. This is inner fortification, and this is an outer fortification, and then you had a settlement in between, and it had 2 access points. And for that matter, coincidentally, even today also it has these 2 entry and exit points. And herein you can see these on the right hand side, the images of the mounds, which are actually basically nothing but the fortification wall. And this was excavated by ASI way back in late 1950s. Koshambi in Uttar Pradesh also gives us an earlier reference going back to about 3rd century BC, wherein the fortification around the palace complex, and you see the cross section of the fortification wall. It is about 15-16 meter high fortification wall, about 20 feet thick, and you can also see the size of the brick. If you look at the human scale and the size of the brick, this is an enormous fortification by any stretch of imagination. Another example, a very interesting one, is Sisupalgarh in Odisha, not very far off from Bhubaneswar. As you're going from Bhubaneswar to Dholi, you see this almost square in plan, slightly tilted. Each side has 2 control points. This is an image which was taken, an aerial image which was taken in the early 60s. And corresponding Google image also shows almost a similar sort of a configuration of the fortification it didn't have a moat, but it had a natural sort of a river which was flowing close by. And this is the western gate and the western part of the fortification of the Sisupalgarh, which was excavated by ASI. Then the 3rd, 4th century BC Cyclopean wall, which encircles the Rajgir, is another very interesting example of fortification around this ancient capital. And of course, it also had strategic sort of controlling the location of the wall that sort of meanders over the hills and the bastions, and then the entrance gateways. This is also one of the earliest references that we find. Interestingly, I think, Shikha, I'm aware that the state government of Rajasthan is preparing a nomination dossier for Rajgir, and that includes this Cyclopean wall as well. I think you are also associated with it. Then various other examples. Most forts, you would notice that their references go back to 3rd, 4th century, but actual constructions have happened later, 8th, 9th century, and the medieval ones even later than that. But the Bhatner Fort in Rajasthan, in the Hanuman district, and Bhatinda Fort in Punjab, again follow a very similar sort of a profile. Both are built. Bhatner Fort is built, I go back, on top of a mount, so which basically was a settlement. The settlement goes back much. It predates the fort by several centuries. But of course, the fortification also, you note that it encircles the settlement, has these very interesting circular these bastions. The walls are much thicker. The outer veneer is brick, but the inner veneer is also all basically the mud walls. And here are the shots of the interiors, which must have been some structures with the settlements within. And the same goes with the Bhatinda Fort. And here you can see a portion where the veneer bricks have fallen off. You can see the mud bricks inside. So it's a multi-layered kind of a fort. Regionally speaking, if I'll go to Ladakh. Ladakh has several fortresses. They aren't major forts. They are fortresses locally known as khars. The left-hand image is that of a fort in Zanskar called Zangla. So that's the fort on top of a hill. Herein the forts aren't as grand simply because of the non-availability of the land. So whatever sort of portions on over the hills where it is easy to construct, basically they would build it. This is an example of the Vanda Khar, and beneath is the example of one of the watchtowers over Leh town. It's slightly built slightly above Leh Palace. So they are not grand in scale. And similarly in Lahore there are several watchtowers that you may see, but they aren't forts or castles. Same, I think in Spiti also there aren't any major castles, though Dhankar, which is one of the houses, a 600-year-old monastery, has a small fortress. Interestingly enough, because of the constant invasions and attacks, most monasteries in this region adapted and had a very fort-like sort of a countenance. And in fact, this typology of monasteries is also known as the hilltop or the hill fort monasteries. So this is Thikse Gompa and this is the Chamde Gompa. Gompa is a monastery, both with very fort-like features in it. Himachal has two major forts. If you come to the lower parts of the Himachal, Kangra is the largest of them all, and Nurpur, which is near Pathankot, is another important fort. Usually forts which are built on the hill, and that is true I think elsewhere also, it follows the profile and the terrain and the contours of the hill. So whether it is the access or the fortification wall or the upper portions, whatever it is, it basically follows the contoured profile. Punjab has quite a few forts, but I just thought I'll show you one example of which is Kila Mubarak. And Kila Mubarak has it's basically a fort within a fort. Outside you have Kila Mubarak with several important palace buildings like Rani Mahal and Darbar Har and all. And inside what is called as the Kila Androon, which is the main palace area built slightly later, is a 9 courtyard configured fort cum palace. Red Fort needs obviously no introduction. I think I will be moving fast because I just want to give you sort of an example. Instead of showing you Agra Fort or showing you that fortified capital of Fatehpur Sikri or Jama Masjid, I just thought I'll show you this image of this 11-kilometer long fortification wall that runs along all around Fatehpur Sikri, and that portion where supposedly there was a lake which got dried, and that led to the exodus of the emperor. So that's Fatehpur Sikri. Rajasthan has got hundreds of forts, but there are 39-40 of them critical. Rajasthan is one, I think 2 states have got maximum number of forts, Rajasthan and Maharashtra. Rajasthan has an extensive history of fort construction. It has got 6 forts which are on the World Heritage list. They're obviously a state, serial nomination, and there are countless small fortresses, most of them now actually also getting converted for various uses. And it has basically all the hill fort types, whether the hill forts, the desert fort, the forest fort, the land fort, the water fort. Name an example or a type, Rajasthan actually demonstrates these typologies. Central India, Jhansi Fort, Gwalior Fort, and there is another one, Kalinjar Fort, are, to my mind, some of the exceptional forts in the central part of India. You move down to Deccan Sultanate, again, many forts with the legendary association with Chhatrapati Shivaji again are found. They proliferate this region. Just to give you one or two examples of Lohgarh Fort, Raigad Fort, Daulatabad Fort. Daulatabad is actually believed to be one of those very few impregnable forts. So then another very interesting typology, and I hope there is a nomination for this in future. These are very good examples of forts from India which are not yet on the list. They deserve to be on the list, which are the island or the sea forts, particularly along the coastline of Maharashtra. There are quite a few of them. And they were again some of these forts have an association with Chhatrapati Shivaji, and these used to be basically guarding the coastline as well as check the movement along the Indian Ocean. So Janjira or the Korlai Fort or the Kasa Fort or the Vijay Durg, there are 10 or 11 of these forts which are basically the island fort. The Deccan Sultanate offers us another very interesting variety and typology of forts, which has concentric fortification walls surrounded by multiple moats and very different sort of architectural styles. A lot of Persian influence as well as discernible over here. In fact, Gulbarga Fort is known for its as they say the longest cannon in the world, and also it has the Jama Masjid, which is the largest congregational mosque without a courtyard. It's a covered mosque. And then certain local forts. I just thought I'll share this fort with a very elephantine kind of profile. Bhuvangiri Fort in Telangana, with the watchtower and some of the palace remains that one can see on top of this. This is a monolith on top of which the fort is there, and the fortification actually runs at the base of this at this hill. Karnataka has several very critical, very important forts, and I'm just showing you 2 or 3 examples of that. Chitradurga Fort is one of the largest forts in Karnataka, and Uchandi Durg is another very important fort, which is essentially a hilltop fort built over the Granite Hill. Aihole and Badami, both more known for their temple architecture or cave architecture, also have a fortification, around some of the temples. I was quite astonished to see this fortification that runs along this plateau over the Badami temple and Badami caves, and Meguti temple in Aihole, which is a Jain temple. It's a slightly later period temple, also has this fortification. And this concept of fortification you can see in many temples across particularly in South India. And I gave you an example of Tanjore temple in Tanjore, this Brihadeshwara temple, sorry, in Tanjore. Chennai again has several critical forts, and Jinji is the largest of these forts. In fact, Jinji Fort is built spread over 3 local hills, and each hill, the Rajgiri, the Krishnagiri, and the Chikali Durg, have their individual forts, and all 3 of them then have a concentric ring of fortification. Vellore Fort, Barabati Fort in Cuttack near Odisha, and then you have the forts where the colonial manifestation can be seen, whether it's Portuguese or the Dutch or the British. I thought I'll share some of examples like Diu Fort. I'm not deliberately showing examples of Goa forts because they're also obviously Portuguese forts. Many forts in Kerala also have these influences from outside. Bekal, Palakkad, Anyuddhindu, St. Angelo Fort. Chennai has forts in George and this Dutch fort at Sadras. I just thought I'll show you some of these examples. Quickly talking about ASI, not that ASI is unknown to you all, but I thought I'll give you certain statistics and give you an example of this work that we have done in Red Fort. Established in 1861, I often say that this is an organization which has not only contributed to the history of India, but it has a history of its own. As of now, we have 3,691 monuments or archaeological sites and remains across the country. Sizable number, not enough perhaps, but nevertheless, these are all nationally important monuments. And out of 38 World Heritage Sites or properties in India, we have 22 of them. But if you look at in terms of notification, these 22 World Heritage Sites actually cover about 310 odd ASI monuments. Now, why I say so is that if you're talking about Champaner Pavagadh, it has obviously a larger number of ASI monuments. Same with Hampi, same with Fatehpur Sikri. So the list actually of monuments swells. So literally about 8% of ASI monuments are World Heritage monuments. Out of 3691, about 142 of them are ticketed. 50 of them have an associated site museums and several important functions, including exploration, excavation, implementation of the MSR Act, conservation and environmental development, site museum research, publication, and as I said, that we are also the nodal agency for the World Heritage matters. We're guided by our National Policy for Conservation of Monuments, Archaeological Sites and Remains 2014. Conservation, of course, is one of the important mandates of ASI. I'm thankful to Shikha for giving me this figure of number of forts which are protected by ASI across the country. So nearly 250 of them are protected. Conservation work is carried out by our circles and mini circles throughout the country, and it's usually the team of archaeologists, engineers, scientists, horticulturists who all work together for implementing this approved conservation program. Of late, we have started working on preparing conservation management plans, and as Professor Bagga pointed out, for Red Fort and several other World Heritage monuments, we have now prepared or got prepared the conservation plans. And then we are now trying to ensure that there is a multidisciplinary initiative or stakeholder consultation that is carried out for our conservation operation. Quickly give you an example of Red Fort, and I think this is something that I've worked along with my senior colleagues for about a year and a half. I think there was a lot of sort of criticism, and justifiably so, that there was a question about conservation works not being carried out. The non-implementation, I'm sure most of you would know that there is a comprehensive conservation management plan that was prepared for the Red Fort under the Supreme Court sort of directions. It was felt that most British period buildings were lying vacant. The areas were not properly landscaped. Areas were closed to public. There was no coherent movement pattern inside the fort. There were people living inside, and there were nearly 200 people living inside, and there were 400 incongruous modern buildings inside. The visitor experience or perception was very poor. I mean, there were hardly any amenities. And our circle was burdened and didn't have a capacity to undertake this range of work. And most important, there was a lack of coordination amongst stakeholders, and not many perhaps would know that occasions like 15th of August or 26th January, there was a tremendous pressure on the circles to carry out emergency conservation works or repair works wherever felt. So the coordination with various agencies was increasing, was a challenge. In the last year and a half, more than 70 projects were identified inside Red Fort, which ranged from conservation to scientific cleaning, to horticulture, to creating experiential museums, to removing these nearly 500 modern, buildings within, and sort of all these people who were living inside the fort, reworking that entire circulation, developing a holding area for visitor, developing amenities, a complete re-electrification, doing the underground wiring, the cobbling in DQ stone, illumination of buildings, opening of monuments. Till now it is open till 9 o'clock for visitors. Once the monuments are now open once again, and through public-private partnership mode, there is a state-of-the-art art gallery. An interpretation center is being developed, and there is also a proposal for a multi-activity center. When I talked about multiple stakeholder consultation, of course, ASI was looking after conservation aspects, but we had for certain works, we engaged the NBCC, particularly for the illumination, for the repairs to the barracks, the drainage to be provided. CPWD did a complete re-electrification and underground cabling. Private parties parties like Dalmia's group are working on the Interpretation Center and an experiential sound and light program. Another body called DAG, Delhi Art Group, Drishyam Art Gallery, has also put up a very interesting exhibition in one of the barrack buildings. And in fact, maybe some of you would like to see it, because they have exhibited about 140 of the original Daniel's lithographs, which are displayed there. So maybe you would like to have a look at it. Very interestingly, the Chhatta Bazaar Shopkeepers Association, the way they led from front in helping us in the conservation of Chhatta Bazaar. Now, I think I'll quickly show images because I'm mindful of the time. When we were restoring Lahori Gate Rampart, we realized that there's about 10 to 12 feet of accumulated earth with the grass growing around. It had a huge challenge because the constant watering of it actually would ensure that this rampart would be constantly wet, and of course the dead weight on it. So when we started removing the earth from it, I think our rough estimate is that nearly 2 million kilos of earth was removed from the rampart, the Lahori Gate rampart. And this actually led to that we found these structures which were buried underneath. So you can see here nothing is visible, and that this these steps came out after this debris was removed. And this central area, which was very haphazardly sort of planned over the years, again the complete drainage was undertaken. The levels were lowered down. I'm sure all of you would be knowing that Red Fort levels at the moment inside are about 2.5 to 3 feet higher than what they originally were. When I say originally, it means that even as late as about mid 19th century. So the levels had increased substantially. So herein, we couldn't unfortunately go back to that level, because that would have meant that this entire hydrology of the fort and the surrounding area we would have disturbed. But we still, to the extent possible, we lowered the levels, created holding area for visitors, because there was hardly any place for them to sit. So at certain spots, these very sensitively designed holding areas were created. Chhatta Bazaar, as I was saying, that is one of our very proud success stories, where the shopkeepers participated. Now, this is the 19th century painting, which is giving us an idea about the interior of the Chhatta Bazaar. So I don't know if you've been to Fort in the last couple of years, you would have seen very sort of unsightly appearance of the bazaar. Herein, we persuaded the shopkeepers to take everything inside. Have a controlled shop fronts. Now, of course, it has to cater to modern day requirements. So obviously that has to be factored in. Interestingly enough, every shopkeeper, when we gave them this design, they got it, they got the carpenters and all, and they got it done themselves. That was really encouraging for us, because we didn't expect it to begin with, but this is something that we achieved with the constant negotiation and interaction with them. And not only that, because of the references in the paintings, not only this one, but there are other references also available, that we were able to retrieve and restore the ceiling paintings inside the Chhatta Bazaar, as you can see in this right-hand side image. And here is an example where it was a 7 or 8 layer image of plaster, layers of plaster or lime wash on the paintings. So here in half the portion, you can see the lime wash is still there, and then here the lime wash has been removed, and the original paintings, which are all floral, very minute floral decorations, they have all come out. Another one which I was very proudly associated with is the restoration of this jali in the Khwabga area. And this jali, which was missing in several portions, but there are paintings and early 20th century photographs which give us a complete idea about how this jali was like. It took us, it may appear a small work, but it took us about 8 or 9 months to actually restore this jali. We had to obviously get people from Agra, from Rajasthan. These obviously these are the specialist carvers who handle marble work, and they helped us. In fact, we were keeping in mind the specifications and all, we had to replace or change the stone thrice before we could match the specification of marble. Then removing, as I mentioned in the beginning, about 450, 500 odd structures. There were toilet blocks, there were smaller structures that were built by the army, and in most cases, when these were removed, we could retrieve these large tracts of land which were completely almost buried under these incongruous developments. And you can see here in Hayat Baksh Park where there was a toilet block and there was another adjoining structure. So when we removed those incongruous structure, we were able to recover a portion of the garden. So I think it was one attempt that we made in trying to restore the authenticity or recover the integrity of the fort. Illumination that we did of the ramparts and of certain structures within, and today if you would go inside once the monuments are open, I think it would give you a very delightful sort of an experience. Then the cleaning of the marble structures within the monument. These are the examples. This is one work that we did inside the Diwan-e-Khas of the Red Fort. And then the reuse of the barrack buildings. There are about 10 or 11 major barrack buildings. 5 of them have been converted into museums. There's one, had the lockdown not been there, that would have been inaugurated as well, which is going to house our the earlier collection, which was kept in Mumtaz Mahal. So that is also coming in one of the barrack buildings, and 3 of the barrack buildings on the other side have been restored, and they will be reused to house the additional artifacts from the National Museum. So that is a work in progress at the moment as well. In terms of the management, particularly for the monuments with very high visits, that is a huge challenge given our own sort of manpower that we have. And we often have very unruly scenes at the entrance or the exit points. So in order to control that, a number of steps were taken. The turnstiles and all were sort of added. The ticketing system was entirely computerized. Now you have the online ticketing system. So that has helped reduce the pressure. And these turnstiles have been taken slightly outside the monument so that once people cross from here, then it's a simple sort of it's a free movement thereon inside the fort. Even the new designs that were created of the amenities, they were done in a way that they sympathetically kind of associated with the Red Fort architecture. So literally in about a year and a half, we've undertaken works about 60 crores in last a year and a half. But that has led to a very interesting revelation in terms of a significant increase in visitor footfall or revenue generation. The number of people who are visiting the museums has increased manifold. Most critical, all stakeholders are on board. It has helped us in enhancing our public perception, and it's sort of people who come over there, they like to spend at least half a day to a day inside the Red Fort. And our estimation is that it was a source of employment to hundreds of skilled craftsmen, masons and workers, and all concerned stakeholders were on board, making it a successful endeavor. So I thought I'll showcase this example to you. Now, as far as the World Heritage is concerned, this is the last leg of my my presentation. ASI, as I mentioned in somewhere a while back, that it is the nodal agency on behalf of the Ministry of Culture for World Heritage Matters. So we have a small section, and there is a constant coordination with the World Heritage Center Paris, the permanent representative of India to UNESCO, and various other international bodies, various ministries, the state governments, and other agencies. So whether it is the preparation of nomination dossiers or various other reports like state of conservation reports, site management plans, we tend to do a lot of hand-holding. The periodic review of tentative lists, if Shikha is listening to me, we are beginning now to relook at the tentative list, because this was last done in 2012 and 13, and it's high time that we should do it again. So we will have a series of I think workshops, maybe webinars now with the state government and other NGOs and other agencies to sort of revisit the tentative list, and the recommendations that were given in the 2013 report, to see how have we gone ahead with that? We also undertake synergy with various missions, then technical discussions on World Heritage matters that happen from time to time, and examine all these documents that come to us. We are thankfully guided by this advisory committee on World Heritage matters, the ACWHM, which was set up by the Ministry of Culture. India signed the convention in '77, and we've been the members of the World Heritage Committee on 3 occasions, from '85 to '91, 2001 to 7, 2011 to 15. As a rule, after 6 years, any state party is eligible to become a member again. So hopefully we should be member again in 2021 to 25. Being a member of the World Heritage Committee means that there is a far greater sort of a participation in the World Heritage matters at global level, for that matter, even in the regional or the national level. We have 38 sites, as I mentioned. We are fifth on the list after Italy, China, Spain, France, and Germany. Italy and China are both tied at 55 at the moment. And the distribution of our cultural properties is that we have 22. One is is jointly with the state government of Rajasthan. 2 properties are with the Ministry of Railways, 1 property with the Bodh Gaya Temple Trust, 1 with Chandigarh Administration, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, Jaipur. I'm sorry, I think I missed out Mumbai here. 1 property is with the BMC, Bombay Municipal Corporation. 7 World Heritage properties which are with the Ministry of Environment and Forest. These are all natural properties, and then 1 mixed property, which is the Kanchenjunga National Park, which is jointly with the Ministry of Environment and Forest and the state government of Sikkim. I think I'll skip this slide because it is repetitive. Now, we are all aware that as of now, Agra Fort, Fatehpur Sikri, Red Fort, and hill forts of Rajasthan, which comprise 6 hill forts, 4 with ASI and 2 with the state government, are as of now on the World Heritage list under different criteria, but they're essentially all the medieval forts that we're looking at. Now, the previous tentative list exercise that was undertaken, as I mentioned, in 2012-13, did this very exhaustive exercise in revising the tentative list document at that point in time. Our list, I think, before that was only about 27 or 28 tentative lists, but after the tentative list exercise was done, it swelled up to 46. Right now, it is 42 of them. What it did was, I thought I'll share it with you, that it sort of reorganized the sites which were on existing tentative list, and it also converted most of them and the new ones also under the serial nomination or the transportory nomination, because in serial nomination you can add more than 1 sites in one go itself. And then also it looked at the lesser represented categories on the World Heritage list, both at the India and the regional level, and encouraged more thematic studies to support the tentative list and future nomination. As a result of this exercise that was done, hill forts of Rajasthan became the World Heritage list, and several of the sites are on the UNESCO's tentative list. For example, the monuments and forts of Deccan Sultanate, which comprise Golconda, Bidar, Gulbarga, and Bijapur, have several forts in it. Then glorious Kakatiya temples and gateways has a component of Warangal fort in it, even though it focuses on the gateways. And then historic ensemble of Orcha also is looking at the fortified settlement. I don't know, maybe these discussions have already happened in this forum and I don't want to repeat it, but there are many other, I think, categories, in my opinion, and this has been pointed out in this tentative list report as well, which deserve to be on the World Heritage list. Now, for example, these coastal sea or marine forts along the coast of Maharashtra, Janjira, Arnala, Bassein, Sindhudurg, Swarnadurg, Vijayadurg, Jaigarh, Kasa, Kolaba. I mean, these are exceptional settings, exceptional fort architecture. These kind of typologies aren't visible anywhere else. Then the Maratha forts in Maharashtra is another very interesting example, a set of sort of forts which occupy a very strategic sort of vantage points on top of the hill, which helped in sort of evolving a certain defense mechanism. So Raigad Fort, Panhala, Lohgarh, Solapur, Singhar, Shivneri, Torna Fort are some very interesting examples. And then the coastal colonial forts like Portuguese forts or the forts in Kerala or the British forts could be another set of forts that we could look at. I think with this, I'll end my presentation, and I thought I'll share with you this stunning view of the Manjarabad fort in Danjian. In the sort of in the region of the Western Ghats. It's in the district of Malnad. It's an 8-pointed star fort which was built and occupied by Tipu Sultan. So I thought I'd share this slide to end with. Thank you very much, Professor Bagga, for this opportunity for me. If there are any questions or any comments, I'm very happy to take that. Thank you.
Thank you, Janhwij. That was a wonderful presentation. A lot of takeaways. I have been taking notes. I'm sure the others have also. Questions have been pouring in. Time being limited, and we have a panel discussion later where Janhwij would join us. So we would take more questions there. But as of now, I have 3 questions with me, Janhwij, if I could quickly take them one by one. Well, the first question is coming here from one of our ICOFORT members, and the question is, can be the best technique to protect forts in high rainfall regions such as Maharashtra?
I'm so sorry. What are the... voice is cracking. I'm so sorry. Your voice is cracking. I'm unable to hear clearly.
Am I better now?
Yes,
Janhwij?
Yes.
Okay. So the take of ASI and how it would meet the challenge of protecting forts in high rainfall regions such as Maharashtra.
High rainfall regions. No, I don't know whether there is any particular fort in mind or not, but I think the challenges of working in hill forts, for example, you know, had I got more time, perhaps I would have spoken about several initiatives that we are taking along with state government of Maharashtra in Raigad Fort. Now that's also very challenging, and maybe the issue that you've talked about is applicable over there as well. I don't think there is much threat from rain, not that I'm aware of, to be very honest, but the challenges over there are more in terms of the material management and how do you take the material up over there. You're looking at forts at an elevation of about 700-800 meters, and there is no way that you can take the material by any mechanical means. So all you have to, everything is going through head load, and that is not only a challenge in terms of the time that it takes, but it is also a drain on the resource, because if you're taking a bag of lime which may cost at the base X rupees, here by the time you're taking it up, you know, the rates obviously jack up like anything. So I think taking the material up there is quite a challenge, and handling the terrain is quite a challenge. But most of the forts, I don't, at least I haven't come across any example or any such issue wherein rains have created a havoc over there, and we have to sort of handle that issue, unless and until the person whose question has a specific sort of issue in mind or a specific example in mind, which even though I may not be able to example right now, but I can approach him or her, you know, in a while from now, after taking replies from my circle, because I wouldn't be aware of the localized solutions. But my general impression is that by and large, rains perhaps may not be as detrimental over here.
The factor of rain is one, the humidity and the workability, as you mentioned, at the high altitude might be a deterrent when it comes to managing the you know, repair works or the conservation of such a place. Second small question that we have is that what is the status of the 14 historic gardens within the Red Fort?
We are, well, first of all, the gardens that are there right now, they are being maintained the way they are. But it is in our strategy to begin with, restore 2 of the gardens. One is, of course, the Hayat Baksh Park, and the second one is the Mehtab Bagh. In Mehtab Bagh, we have attempted, if this questioner has been to the site of late, we have attempted to sort of excavate the central channel. It's a cross channel, so that channel we have excavated. We found out, obviously we had references to that, so that is what we have excavated, and that is being preserved right now. And I think Mehta Bagh is one garden that perhaps we're working towards its restoring. See, I tell you one thing: we don't have we do have pictorial references, or the 19th century drawings give us an indication of a garden over there, but we don't have detailed plans and the layouts of these gardens. So in many ways, if we are trying to restore them, there will be an element of perhaps conjecture involved in it. We may follow the outline, the divisions of a garden, and as it is, we may also use the flora, which is essentially the Mughal flora, which was used in these gardens. And one, for example, an attempt, it's a deviation now, like we did it in case of Itmaduddaulah in Agra or Mehta Bagh in Agra. So we may do that a similar approach here in case of Mehta Bagh also. So yes, for the two of the gardens, the restoration of these gardens, including the structures within, is on the cards and is going on. As of now, for the other gardens that you've mentioned, no, there is no proposal at the moment for these inside. So we are maintaining the status quo as it is.
Okay. So just to mention, the first question on the Maharashtra rainfall question was made by Indrajit Patachura, and the second is from Professor Pralin Singh on the 14 gardens.
I'm not surprised.
So we have one more question. We'll quickly take it. What can the ASI do to conserve and preserve the Sisupalgarh fort? Is there any potential joint initiative with the government of Odisha which is being considered?
I'll have to be honest, find that out, because these are
Okay.
local issues.
So this is from Muhammad Nahar, and
okay.
we can
but
always.
I believe there was some excavation that was carried out a few years back. But as I said, that what is the current status right now is something that I would have to find it out. But I will get back to the ICOFORT on this, and I'll provide an answer so that it can be given to this gentleman.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this, sparing your time, and we're going to have you back on the panel shortly for the panel discussion. And we'll move on for the next set of presentations now. Thank you so much, Janhwij.
Thank you very much, Professor Bagga. Thank you.
Yeah. Moving on to the next part of this evening's grand finale presentations, we have now to go back to our eastern forts and to the southern forts. These would be presented. The presenters here are, the first one being, can I have the brochure again, please, for a minute? Could we go back to the poster for a minute, please? For those of us who are joining it. Thank you. Nitya, Bali and Apurva Sinha would now be talking about the uncovered, the fortified realm of Andhra. And I would like to begin this by introducing the two young presenters from ICOFORT, Nitya Bali and Apurva Sinha. Apurva is an ecologist trained from the Institute of Archaeology, ASI, an enthusiast working in the same field for both the government and non-government for the past 7 years. She also has worked with the National Mission on Monuments and Antiquities as a research associate, and is associated with Drona Gurgaon, where she has assisted in 14 heritage and museum projects, and has a professional experience in handling national and international UNESCO projects. Apurva's articles also form part of a prestigious art magazine, which she has shared her explorations through ancient, modern, and contemporary art, being a full-time writer and also a copy editor of the magazine. Additionally, she has written 2 catalogs and contributed in an art auction. She is a member trustee of Academy of Visual Arts, AVOM, a Delhi-based non-profit organization. Nitya Bali is an architect based and works also for Drona. Moving down, just a minute. Nitya is an architect currently pursuing her MSc in Heritage and Interpretation from the University of Leicester, UK. She's a recipient of the Commonwealth Distance Learning Scholarship 2019 for her master's program. With an experience of 4 years where she has worked extensively on various heritage and museum sites across India, she has also been associated with Drona since 2016, has had the opportunity to work on several projects, and those that she has contributed significantly to include a conservation management plan for the Government Museum and Art Gallery Chandigarh under the Keeping It Modern grant by the Getty Foundation, a demonstration project at Kondapalli Fort, Andhra, and the Partition Museum project, Amritsar. She has also worked as a consultant architect for Ms. Bhavna Dandona for the documentation and condition assessment of FF balcony at Chancery American Embassy, New Delhi. With this vast experience, these young two professionals from ICOFORT, our team, are now going to present, and they have jointly started an initiative through which they have been actively working with the ASI. So over to Nitya and Apurva.
Thank you, Professor Bagga, for the introduction. Quote, uneven land, ample extensive space, plentiful grass, fuel and water for their subjects, non-existence of the enemies, abundant storage of food grains and liquids, entrance and exit doors, and brave men for protection. These are the excellences of a fort. The storehouse of everything should be surrounded by ramparts and series of hills in a good fort. This excerpt is from Niti Vakyamritam, written in the 10th century CE by Somdev. Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to speak about a region which is endowed with a rich potentiality of the natural resources like vast river basins of Godavari and Krishna, high mountain ridges like the Eastern Ghats, and a dense forest system. Besides, a variety of mineral ores that makes it an economically viable region. The state of Andhra Pradesh is characterized by wide deltas where the monsoons act as a great force in shaping the shoreline features. With this unique geomorphological feature, the region developed into an assortment of cultural and natural heritage. As you take a tour of all the forts of Andhra, let me now give you a historical glimpse of the ancient Andhra days. The region was ruled by Satavahanas from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century CE, which is testified by their capital at Dharnikota, the modern Amravati on the south bank of river Krishna in Guntur district. In the 4th century CE, Salunkianas of Vengi dominated the region lying between Krishna and Godavari rivers. Meanwhile, in the middle of the 4th century CE, rose to power in coastal Andhra another family of importance known as Vishnu Kundins, who supplanted the Salunkianas. They ruled up to the last quarter of the 6th century CE. The next epoch in the political history of coastal Andhra begins with the advent of Eastern Chalukyas of Vengi, who ruled over the entire coastal tract for a period of over 5 centuries. The downfall of Chalukyas provided impetus to the rise of the dynastic feud known as the Kakatiyas to prominence, with Anumakonda as their first capital and later Warangal. In the year 1323, the Kakatiya dynasty crumbled when its last and the most glorious king, Prataprudra, was defeated in the battle by the Delhi Sultanate. The whole of the Andhra country came under the hegemony of the Tughlaq emperors of Delhi. Reddis, an offshoot branch of Kakatiyas, succeeded them in the 14th century CE, which marked a transition from the early medieval to the medieval period. Where the kingdoms were advancing politically, the trade in the region developed majestically. Given the fact that Krishna River Valley was known for its muslin and diamonds, the entire coastline was always a busy trade zone, as it was littered with a number of ports situated within small distances from each other. Now on your screens, you can see the eastern coast full of ports. The evidence of oceanic trade of Andhra region can be recalled from the ship motif coins with single and double mast ships issued by Satavahanas and Salunkianas. On your screen, you can see 2 coins which depict the ships. Rollated ware. The top image is of the rollated ware, which was excavated at Motupalli. The rollated ware is associated with the Roman trade and Chinese stamped pottery. Some of the distinct ancient trade centers on the eastern coast were Amravati, Dharnikota, Kalingapatnam, Dantapuram, and Salihundam. On the great maritime facades, there are different regions connected to hinterlands, which are favorable to sea traffic. While in the medieval times, the ports of Masulipattnam and Motupalli played a significant role in diffusing Indian culture to overseas countries. This connection with the hinterland facilitated in the rise of fortified cultural landscapes. Subsequently, in the medieval period, some significant capital forts in the history of Andhra are Rajamundri, established by the Eastern Chalukyas of Vengi, Adanki and Kondavidu by the Reddys, Anumakonda and Warangal by the Kakatiyas, Chandavolu by Velanati Cholas, and Nellore by Telugu Cholas. Like the capital forts, the frontier forts played a vital role in protection of the territory, exercised control over trading activities and political administration. Some of the important frontier forts are Venukonda, Kondapalli, Udaygiri, Adoni, Gutti, Ramagiri, Kolas, and Bhuvangiri. Well, that was about the history of the ancient Andhra days. Today, we are going to talk about Kondapalli, which was one of the frontier forts of the Reddy kingdom. Well, the antiquity of the Kondapalli region can be traced back to the 10th century CE, when it was a vital administrative and military post during the reign of Eastern Chalukyas. Later, the region was ruled by Kakatiyas, followed by Reddys, Gajapatis of Orissas, Rayas of Vijayanagar, Bahmani Sultans, Qutub Shahis, Mughals for a very small period, Asafzahis, and finally it became a part of British India. In each period, the fort at Kondapalli acted as a frontier barrier by maintaining the political and military administration. Now, my partner Nitya Bali will give you a glimpse of role of Kondapalli and in various regimes and its architectural typology. Over to you, Nitya.
Thanks, Apurva. I hope I'm audible and the screen is also good.
Yes.
All right. A very good evening to all. I shall now take you through the other two sections of our presentation. Kondapalli is a village located 16 kilometers east of Vijayawada in Krishna district of Andhra Pradesh. The hill range is the meeting point of northern and central part of the Eastern Ghats. Geologically, the Kondapalli hill ranges comprise of a variety of rock types such as granite and charnocite. I guess the presentation is stuck. Sorry. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah, it's stuck. Yash?
Yes.
The presentation stuck.
It's a little slow.
Yeah.
So maybe Yash can do it.
Now it's happened. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Looking at its strategic location and rich environs of Kondapalli, the region advanced from an administrative unit to a fortified landscape in the medieval period. Kondapalli is a hill fort located on the Kondapalli range amidst a dense forest. The fort is a combination of a Giri and Vana Durga. Lying on the coastal region of Andhra, Kondapalli region played a vital role in monitoring the administration as well as promotion of trade activities during the rule of Chalukyas. Some of the important forts of the Kakatiya regime are Golconda, Warangal, Gandikota, Gutti, Raichur, and Udaygiri. Positioned in close proximity with their capital fort of Warangal, Kondapalli region acted as an outpost for the Kakatiya administration. Kondapalli fort was in close proximity with the capital fort of Kondavidu, which played an important role in expulsion of attacks from the east and simultaneously controlled coastal Andhra. South of Kondavidu lay the fortress of Venukonda and Velamkonda, which formed a trilateral and provided an excellent scope to the strategy of the Hindu generals. After a comparative study done with the Kondavidu fort, number of similar architectural features were identified, such as the trabeate gateway with slide ornamentation, which is seen both at eastern gateway of Kondapalli and northern gateway of Kondavidu respectively. The fort at Kondapalli was captured by Gajapatis of Orissa to expand their territories towards south, which brought them into a conflict with the Vijayanagara Empire. For Gajapatis, the Kondapalli fort was their southernmost boundary to retaliate the attacks from the south. Some of the important forts of the Vijayanagara period are Udaygiri, Kandukur, Vinukonda, Belamkonda, Nagarjunakonda, Bizavada, Kondavidu, and Fort Noor. Kondapalli was captured by Krishnadeva Raya during his Kalinga expedition. The Qutub Shahi rulers had their capital at Golconda, and Kondapalli was their easternmost frontier fort. The fort played a vital role in the trade and commerce as it fell on the route from Golconda to Masulipatam. It is in the 16th century CE that port town of Masulipatam reached its zenith. During the Asaf Jahi period too, the fort acted as a trade center owing to its close proximity with Masulipatam. It was in 1859 when Kondapalli was initially used as a military station by British, and later on it was abandoned by them as they found it highly expensive to maintain. To go ahead with art and architectural style of Kondapalli fort, the architectural evolution can be traced back to the 14th century during the rule of Reddis. Only remains of the Reddy period are the inner fortification wall, trabeiate gateways in the south and east respectively, and temple remains on the southern part of the inner fortification. The fortification wall, made up of chiseled stone with no mortar, clearly indicates towards the pre-Islamic period. The trabeiate gateway on the south was converted into an arch in the later period, while the one on the east is intact with an inscription in Telugu script, which you see on the screen right now. Some remains of the Vijayanagara period were also found near the eastern Hanuman gate. The remains comprise of a Ganesha sculpture and an inscription on the rock alongside Anjanya. Later in the Qutub Shahi period, additions were made in the fort, such as the outer fortification, a later component which was built by Qutub Shahi ruler Ibrahim Quli Qutub Shah, and the palace components in the inner fortification. Now, area-wise, I'll just take you through the regions. Darbar Hall, which is locally known as Gajashala. The ground floor has many chambers with stone pillars. The first floor is reached by a flight of steps and had 35 pillars, out of whom some of them bear terracotta pipe. Artistic stucco motifs of the Qutub Shahi period are seen on some of the walls. The lower level of the hall is divided into vaulted bays. A chamber with triple openings set into the rear walls was reserved for the Sultan. The rooftop pavilion offers uninterrupted views of the palace below, as well as of the entire city and its surroundings. The Darbar Hall at Kondapalli was built by Abul Hasan Tana Shah, the last ruler of Qutub Shahi. Now coming to Rani Mahal and Diwan Khana. To the east of Darbar Hall is the Rani Mahal, of which the enclosed courtyard only remains. Rani Mahal was connected to Darbar Hall with a staircase. Diwan Khana lies north of the Rani Mahal. The remains of Diwan Khana are its cells. It is believed that it was once decorated with lime stucco motifs. Coming to the market yard. To the north of Diwan Khana is believed to be the market space, which had 50 stalls. These are the 360 views of the areas which you're seeing on the screen right now. I hope they enable better understanding of the fort complex for all of you. Now going to the next area, which is the jail. The jail is a rectangular building with 18 rooms and ventilators. It is believed that it was once used as a granary. This is the second viewpoint where one can enjoy the aerial view of the Kondapalli village. And these are the two structures of the jail. And ending with Kuneru. It is a fresh water source to the east of the inner palace complex. The fort area is full of tanks and stepwells. Thus, the artistic history of Kondapalli showcases veracity and chimera of the evolution and change in the political scenario. Preservation of our heritage for future, along with safeguarding the practices, expressions, knowledge, and skills associated with communities and groups. With this thought, I would now like to ask Apurva to talk about the legacy of Kondapalli.
Thank you, Nitya. Traditional craftsmanship is perhaps the most tangible manifestation of intangible cultural heritage. Kondapalli toy making is a 400-year-old art form oral tradition recalls a migration of artisans from Rajasthan to Andhra Pradesh in the 16th century. The geographical indication marks Kondapalli for its specific toy-making practice, aiming to preserve the reputation and native artistry of the region. While the Krishna Leela is one of the most important themes of the Kondapalli toys. I have one. So you can grab a few of these toys during your visit to the fort. Over to you, Nitya.
Thanks, Apurva. Well, Apurva has spoken about Kondapalli toys. Let me now tell you about the rich forest reserve around the fort. It is spread over an area of 30,000 acres and is under the protection of Andhra Pradesh Forest Department. The wood used for carving Kondapalli toys is from a locally abundant tree known as Tela poniki, which is available in abundance in the Kondapalli forest. Truly, the fort is an exemplary site of tangible and intangible cultural heritage. I would now like to conclude our presentation with a quote by Somadeva. To enter the enemy's fort through stratagem, to sow dissension among the enemy's officers, and subjects to besiege for a long time to attack, and to employ persons capable of killing by the administration of poison, these are the ways to acquire force. We would like to thank Rona for providing us the opportunity to work on the project and carry out this research. Thank you everyone for being such patient listeners. Hope you enjoyed our session and have a beautiful evening ahead.
Thank you, Nitya. And it was a brilliant and refreshing presentation, and especially the insights into the cultural diversity and the significance that you brought in and linked the travel of the Rajasthani craftsmen to Kondapalli. And of course, definitely most of us are seeking to be there sometime if we still haven't been. I would like to now move on to our next speaker for the day, that is Somi Chatterjee. She will talk about geography, geology, and the nature forts of the East. To introduce Somi, Somi is a faculty at Jamia Millia Islamia, the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. A conservation architect, she has been working on various projects related to conservation, planning, and architecture within the private and public sectors. A partner and principal conservation architect at Creative Footprints, founder and director of One State Million Stories Private Limited. She's also the founder trustee for Trust for Regeneration of Indian Settlements. A visiting faculty, as I mentioned, at the Jamia Millia. Over more than a decade of experience, she's been working on inscribed and tentative World Heritage sites in varying capacities. And she has a wide range of clients that include the ASI, State Departments of Archaeology, Museums of Government of Maharashtra, Telangana, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Assam, and IRSDC. So welcome, Somi Chatterjee, and we are waiting to listen to you.
Thank you, Professor Bagga. Yash, you will have to run the presentation.
It's visible?
It's visible to me, but not on Facebook, I think.
That Facebook goes till later.
Good evening, everybody. So I'll be talking about the forts of the eastern and northeastern India, specifically in the plain land. So the next slide, please. So go to the next slide. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm sure that everybody so far has seen forts that somehow looks like this, with the exception of the Malhar Fort in Chhattisgarh. I will be taking up from the Malhar Fort and traveling further east because you simply will not see any fort like that. In fact, it will be difficult for you to identify on ground if there is a fort. Next slide. Can you skip 2 slides? Yeah. Next. Next. Yeah. So I'll be talking about the region that's in the red and specifically in the yellow highlights. So if you see that it's a Doab, it's a deltic region We have the Ganga Brahmaputra forming a delta, and somewhere slightly below the point where the rivers join, I will be focusing on that region. Next slide. Next slide. Next. Yeah, so when I started looking at whether we do have forts, I started with the obvious, looked at names, looked at place names which end with the name Gad, Kot, or Pur in this case, but it didn't help much, and I'll point out why. Next slide. Yeah, so can you have a look at this image? There is a fort. There is a 25-kilometer long fort in this image. It starts where that red arrow is, but can you really see it? I doubt. So go to the next slide and I'll walk you through it. Next slide. Yeah, so what you see on the northern section, you see an area highlighted with red. It's called Neem Sarai. That is where the fort would have been entered. It is the outermost junction. And I'm talking about Gaur. That's in eastern part of West Bengal. If you travel further southwards, do you see a particular tank towards your east? It's called Malda Eco-Tourism Area. It's marked out. This is the same Shagor Dighi if you look at the map carefully. Go to the next. Go to the next slide. Next slide. Yeah. The one before that, Yash. Yeah. This junction marked in yellow would have been the first line of defense or a gateway accompanied with a moat from where people would have entered. The first line for the outermost fortification. Can you go to the next slide, please? Roughly, that's the width that's marked in yellow line. You have the first ghat, the entrance point on your eastern side. On the western side, because the rivers have shifted and because the geography has changed, you're unlikely to be able to see the eastern bunds. Can you scroll to the next? This is the typical image of what? Of moat and an entry point to a fort in West Bengal, Assam area is likely to look like. You will have water, you will have ghats on either side. If you do see carefully, right below the temples on the western side, you will see a small earth embankment. This is all that remains of the outer moat. Next. Yes. Now you have, if you follow this section line, that's AA, you were to go to the next slide. So in the next slide, what you see is these are the typical al, which means the name Bengal al word. These are these raised platforms, these raised mounds that you see on either side interspersed with a marsh. This is a feature that you will find. And if you're looking at these features, this is typical to Bengal fort. Now the marshes would have either had water or these would have had bamboo, or at least they had crocodile or snakes to act as a barrier. You're looking at primarily a landscape which needed protection against moving water, a geomorphologically shifting water base. Can you go to the next slide? The next slide this is the only other, okay, you've reached the following slide. Just wait on this slide. Yeah, just hold on. This is a structure. This is probably a garden area, Pulbari, that was there. And this is to the north of the citadel. It could have acted as a garden area. It could have also been another layer for defense. We're not sure of that. Next one. Next one. Now I'm going to take you to what is the leftover portion of a citadel area. Can you go to the next slide? So if you look at it on a Google Earth image, and in fact, if you were standing at site as well, all you would see is trees and water body. It's almost indiscernible that where is this so-called citadel area. If you go to the next one. So when you enter, this is the first marker of probably what a fort with other places, a familiar looking fort feature is. You have, this is the first Dakhil Darwaza, so your entry point. And what you see as raised areas on either side, east and west of the Dakhil Darwaza, are these innermost layer of fortification walls, and which are very much right now a part of landscape features, making it very difficult to identify. Next image. So that's Dakhil Darwaza. If you were on the moat, on the Bund embankment, and you were looking towards the watered area, the moat. The next image. What you do see is the proportion of the moat. Now, the text that describes one, Aine-Akbari's one section does mention these impressionable moat, the Al walls. This was to prevent primarily water from inundating these cities, and rather the fortress areas in this case. Next. Next. Yeah. The only portion of the wall or something reminiscent of what you see in other areas as fort wall, as impregnable fort wall, is this 22 Gazi wall. So only 12 gaz of wall for what is a 25-kilometer long fortified area. Next. This is the southern exit gate. And in most cases, the fort walls have fallen. There is a bund or an aal along the gate to just cordon off the secured area. And then you have another layer of moat. Next. Yash, next slide, please. Next. 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 Yeah. What I'm referring to right now has been the Henry Cutson's map. Now the site encircled in yellow. Yeah, stay on this. The site encircled in yellow, that gateway, is the Kotwali Darwaza. And what you do see on the eastern side, the area marked in blue, is a water gate, possibly from where trade would have taken place. This was definitely along an inland waterway where the river shifted further eastwards and the western river shifted further westwards. Next. So if you were at site, you are actually on the India-Bangladesh border. The area of the site falls outside the border, so there's a high chance that you will not be able to study that area. And presently, the place where you had the last gateway, that's the area marked in yellow, that is near the Petropol, Benapol, the border area. And it just has a gateway standing. Go to the next one. Next slide. If I were to look at this particular type of fort, that's 3 rings of fortification, water area, and just a set of bunds to ward off water, and of course invaders, we are largely looking at a man-made created island, taking advantage of the fact that it is flat terrain and there's a lot of water, just to create like an island fort. Okay, So this is if you were in Bishnupur, I'm showing you certain typical other examples. So this is Bishnupur, which is near Bankura, that's western part of West Bengal. You would still see 3 concentric rings of water bodies, which are now dried up. The innermost fortification is that's on your right. Innermost fortification area would be where the citadel would be located. It is on a higher plane and would be surrounded by a layer of water. And then it would have a moat around it. And subsequently, this is the most guarded one. The next image, go to the next image. Next image. This is a panoramic image. So from the westernmost side, you can see what the terrain looks like. So that's the mound on the eastern side where the word squatter is written right below that. That is all that is left of the fort wall. That's the typical fort wall, the Al fort wall. Next slide. Okay, this is another example of a fort which has again 3 concentric rings of water, which is pretty much similar to what is in Malhar. This is in Moynagar, again southern Bengal. If you note it carefully, you have 1 ring outside which is now converted into a road. The second ring of water you can see, and the third, the innermost ring, is very clear. This is a pattern that you will also see in a lot of Krishna landscapes, for example in Navadvip. Can you go to the next slide? This is a typical section for the water body, and these are man-maintained bunds, intentional bunds. They are not naturally occurring. Next. Next. Yeah. So if you see that on the left-hand side, this particular, the place where you see a lot of these trees growing, it's actually growing on a bund area. On an elevated, it has been intentionally made elevated. Next. Go to the next one. This is one example from Assam. What you do see, this, I think it's quite conspicuous at least, that there are these 2 rectangles. This is in Gargaon. Yeah, this is in Gargaon. This together forms a part of a fort. Now, what you see on the outer side are dried rivers. This would have been the first layer of watered moat. The next one. So what you see in the yellow, that small dot, this is the only remaining physical infrastructure of the fort. The rest are all in the form of bunds, like the images that you saw before. So now the problem with this particular region is, can you go to the next slide? Can you go to the next? Can you skip the next slide? Skip it. Next. Yeah. Now, the problem with this particular region is, this is seismically sensitive. This region is also, it has shifting water channels. This region is a low-lying area. And all the other regions which do have forts either have an elevated platform, or it has abundance of stone, or it has abundance of elevated area and stone. It does not have a shifting geography. Can you go to the next one? So that's the DEM map, which tells you somehow that this is a deltic area. All these river channels that form this area, and of course, to build a fort or to build any settlements, you would need a stable geography. This area does not have a stable geography. Next. So it was a little difficult to piece together a proper DEM map, but this should do that. You're looking at a moribund deltic area. And because we're looking at mainly a deltic area where the water level is high, where it is just the land is forming, and so are the river waters, the river morphology is shifting and changing drastically. What you do not have is stable land. So of course, at any point of time when people were protecting themselves, while they were being protected by the Western Highlands, the river itself, they were also, the inhabitable land was being washed away by these rivers. So at the end, people use what is called terrain intelligence to turn their disadvantage into an advantage. So the bunds that you see is a response to that advantage. And because these bunds are simply landscape features and it alternates with moats, which are water features and have subsequently been filled or have been planted upon, have been built upon, it is very difficult to study these forts in totality. But the study of these eastern forts is extremely important if we were looking at climate change and river morphology indicators, as well as if we would want to see structures, or rather, I would say landscape formations that were used for defense purposes. The first example that I showed you on the Gord, the 25-kilometer long area, we see it from the post-Sultanate rule. If we were focusing on the pre-Sultanate era, we would be able to conjure a little more and more specifically on the typical forts of Eastern India. I don't think this has been widely studied. So I just close my presentation with a closing comment that we need to see what is called the codability bias, that is study what is called the word pud, gar, a little closely, because the parlance changes, our linguistic groups are different. The second thing is, maybe we should be using a little bit of GIS database and resistivity surveys to try and map and peel off layers. Otherwise, these forts will just vanish with the river's movement. Thank you. And I'm sorry this was very broken. It's a little difficult to coordinate. Any questions?
Thank you, Somi. That was a very insightful presentation, and very interesting to note how the Eastern forts have a very different morphological as well as structural nuance to themselves compared to the forts in the rest of India, and how the use of landscape as a defense system. It's been a very insightful presentation, and you're absolutely right in saying that a lot of in-depth study is really, it's required and it's the need of the hour. And,
thank you.
I'm very glad that you are into this piece of work. A simple, straightforward question: what is the present status of conservation, and what is the quantum of fortifications in Eastern India which have been conserved either through people's initiative, government initiative, public partnerships, anything of that sort, which you can throw light upon?
I do not have facts and figures on this, to be very honest. Okay.
As of now.
As of now, I do not have figures about this.
Okay.
But
as a viewpoint, as a general observation,
as a general observation, what has happened is the monuments that are standing, for example, the masjid, the Bada Masjid, the Chota Sona Masjid, let's say just the City of God, those have been protected because they are still standing. They are not natural features.
Yeah, okay. Let's not say formal protection, but something like people's pride in the sense of place or something like that, which you feel because during your research, you must be visiting and you must be going and staying there, and the first idea of the place.
Well, the first idea of the place is that this is an area which has suffered a lot where partition is concerned.
Okay.
So therefore, expecting this kind of what do I say? Extremely
but the
close.
ethos of partition is also a very important factor, which
of
plays
course,
place of pride. Yes,
of course. But to be honest with you, I've not had the chance to interview people on this same question. That's the reason why I said that I cannot tell you clearly or very objectively. the answer to this question.
Okay. So thank you, Somi, and I'd like to move on to Nitya and Apurva now with a similar question. Apurva, Nitya, are you there with me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah. We are there.
So we'd like to hear from you the state of conservation and perhaps the numbers or the quantum of fortifications which are under protection.
So Hooja would start with the numbers and then
there are almost 500 state protected monuments in the state of Andhra Pradesh, out of which only 15 are forts. And some, which includes forts and gates and, ramparts. And in case of nationally protected monuments, the ASI Amravati Circle has protected 137 monuments in the state of Andhra Pradesh, out of which 16 are forts.
And to add to this, that the Guntur region in Andhra Pradesh and Odisha is extensively rich with such fortifications and sites. So it has a lot of potential for research scholars to, as an undertake, this research and carry out documentation and examine these sites for future. So it's a very potential and rich area. So
you are also in that category of the young scholars.
Yes, ma'am, of course.
Wonderful. So you did show a few slides about people, being part of these forts in terms of lifestyle and also, but tell me something about capacity building. Do you think these forts in some ways have become part of people's livelihood, and there is a shared heritage between people and the forts in some ways, that the forts belong to the people and the people are proud of the forts?
Actually, I would say that it's for the overall scenario that when we talk of heritage sites, and this includes forts, so when we say heritage for whom, mostly such sites, especially the fort sites, belong to the indigenous community because they've held that relationship with the rulers from like ages, and they are they have a lot of shared knowledge and a lot of, I would say, rich stuff to share with us when we do the research, when we carry out the research. Particularly when we talk for Kondapalli also, so we have tried to keep the connect with the community. And we also held a workshop for this, and it was in 2017, capacity building workshop. And also for the project, the execution contractor was from the local community. So he also employed the locals. And after the execution of the project, there's been like a revival and boost to the toy making tradition, which was at that time dying. So it's more like these people are also involved, and I think they should not be neglected for any heritage site, because when we talk of values, then they are the most associated with the regional values, and they should always be a part of the project and of the proposals or any development plans we do, even the conservation ones, for any such site.
And just to add to it, by we mean DRONA, Development and Research Organization for Nature, Arts and Heritage. And so DRONA conceptualized an interpretation center in the Darbar Hall space, which you people would have seen. It was a demonstration project, like basically in phase 1, the Darbar Hall was taken up and it was conserved by the local contractor who was trained in lime and mortar. And further, the project was, it extended up to the execution of an interpretation center, which was conceptualized by DRONA. And also a projection mapping show runs in the fort complex, which is in Telugu, in the local language, so that people can understand the history of the fort, and that is how people connect to the fort. So simultaneously with the conservation, we've also done some awareness programs and things like these.
Great, that's good to hear from you. And it's a refreshing thought that fortifications are not just sites of tourist importance and they remain as fossilized places, but they're actually, there's a link between the local community and the fortress, which is perhaps the only solution and the way forward in this kind of partnership. So one quick question to Somi, which is coming from Indrajit Bhattacharya. Somi, you're there?
Yes, I'm there. I'm there.
What condition is the fort of Itakhuli, region of Assam? Itakhuli, region of Assam. There's a fort. Has there been any work on it?
The state has done work on it. The State Department of Archaeology have done work on it. But I visited a long time back. So it's I cannot tell right now what is the state of conservation,
Okay,
but the state
so-
has worked on it.
Yeah, that's right. And Indrajit is with us in our NSC, so we can always come back and Swami can have a detailed discussion at a later stage.
Sure.
So with this, as always, we are running for time and there's a group of panelists also waiting there. So I'd like to thank all my presenters for this great session. And it's also the concluding session of the forts for the categories of forts in the geographical regions. So thank you very much for your time and presentations, Somi and Nitya and Apurva. And with that, I'd like to invite over Ashish to take on board and continue with the panel discussion. Thank you all.
That was really great, Sangeeta. You really managed, and the presentations were all really very good. I think the today's last finale, we would also like to have a panel discussion. So we have the esteemed panel members today, starting, of course, with our today's keynote speaker, Mr. Janhwij Sharma, who is the Joint DG at ASI. I will not really get into their detailed CV because it will be a lot to speak about each of these members. We have Dr. Shikha Jain, director from DRONA, and also has worked on many World Heritage properties, especially in the fortification heritage. We have Dr. Rima Hooja, director of the MSMS2 Museum at, and she also is an author for a lot of publications on heritage of fortifications. And we have architect Shalini Dasgupta, who is a conservation architect and leads and does a lot of conservation works in the north. To begin, I think let me begin with a little introduction that I would like to tell all the members today. In the past, it has been a very wonderful journey of sessions on heritage of defense knowledge. I mean, I would not really stop at saying forts and fortification only. It's basically the entire knowledge systems related to defense that was discussed in all these 5 series of webinars, starting from the anatomy of the forts, the chemistry of arms and ammunitions, stories of cultures, memories of people. So it has so far been a wonderful journey, and I thank all of them. Today, I remember of a wonderful quote mentioned by the founder of Ahmedabad, the Sultan Ahmed Shah. In 1411, on completion of his first fort, the Badra fort, his words were, "Man dakhal hukan amen," literally meaning, whoever is within is safe. This quote itself was a clue to decipher the date of construction, according to the historic text of Ahmedabad. Briefly, before we begin with the panel discussion, I would want to inform you about the NSC Fort Fortification. It is a National Scientific Committee of ICOMOS India. Focus of this committee is on defense site, structures, military heritage, including forts, arsenals, harbors, barracks, so on and so forth. The aim of the NSC, number 1, is to enrich the national database on fortification and military heritage. So this webinar also was wonderful contribution to this first aim of the NSC. Second is to make a case for bringing out the significance of fortification heritage in its today's urban and cultural landscape context of heritage. Third aim is to encourage research about the sites, structures, arms, ammunition, and technologies, and other knowledge from the defense-related heritage. So these are the 3 aims in which this committee is working at present. I call all the members of ICOMOS to join the NSC, and those who are not members of ICOMOS, please be one, and then don't forget to opt for the NSC Fort. Now for the panel discussion, I would like to thank all the experts for today's panel discussion. I would like to request all of you to please switch on your cameras if you're already not. The first aim, as I mentioned, is to bring out the significance of the forts and military heritage. So I would like to invite all the panel members to share their view and begin with the first question, which is, what is the status of fortification in India in terms of heritage value, protection, and conservation? Does it vary in different parts of India, and how? Kindly share your views. I would like to start this discussion with Shalini Dasgupta. Shalini, can you please start?
Thank you, Ashish. And I would like to start with congratulating all the presenters and Janhwij, wonderful presentation. You took us through a wonderful whirlwind tour of all the jewels of forts that we have in India, and a lot of them which, you know, you as an ASI person managed to visit, and we haven't even seen so many of them, you know. So you are actually in an envious position where you managed to see such wonderful places. Start with the question that Ashish has posed. Of course, a lot about the status of fortifications was kind of put across by Janhwij's presentation. So he told us, so there are, and I remember in one of our discussions within the NSC Coordinator group that there are more than 4,000, remember Shikha mentioning that there are more than 4,000 fortifications, forts and fortifications in India today. That's a humongous number. You know, and these sites, of course, are of exceptional value. They are superb examples of architectural engineering examples. And they are, of course, what you've said, that different parts of India, the disposition of these forts is, you know, based on various aspects of the strategic location and the way, you know, our social and political scenario varied over the years based on, you know, whatever historically happened. So the disposition has changed. Like Maharashtra has, I think, the maximum number of forts, followed by Rajasthan, and then so and you have, like Somi presented, there are very few forts in the eastern part of India, or so you see that variation of disposition is there because of our social, geographic, historical, those factors which are there. So some of the areas that I have kind of worked on and have closely looked at is, first, the forts of Punjab. Some work that I did in Patiala, Qila Mubarak, and the other areas. Then I've had the opportunity to look at the Bundelkhand area actually. So Bundelkhand area also has a lot of forts that one is so closely related with the project to Norsha. One had looked at Tikamgarh, is another very unexplored area of, you know, they've got a lot of forts, small forts of, you know, Datia, Devgarh. All these forts in that region are, you know, still need a lot of work. So I think your question, what you were you posed, of course, the, you know, fortification status in India is that we've got this humongous wealth of forts, which really needs to be there. There has been a lot of research, there has been a lot of work done, and we still need to, you know, take lead and do much more in that area. And of course, there is, you know, different parts of India, you know, have different kinds of responses to forts and fortifications.
Wonderful, Shalini. So I think Shalini has a lot of numbers from North. Dr. Sharma, would you like to add to this? What is the Indian picture in terms of fortification heritage?
Well, first of all, thanks, and thank you, Shalini, for appreciating the presentation. Yes, the idea was to actually give a sort of a broader picture and not go into the details, because as I thought that these would have been already covered, so there was no point in repeating. And I'm sorry you're talking about that unfair advantage of visiting some of the sites, but you're always welcome. So if you want to visit, I don't think anybody would stop anyone from that. And so that's okay. Now, as far as your question is concerned, and I read through it, I think as ASI, I'm wearing ASI hat at the moment, and essentially, forts is one of the important typologies that ASI is conserving. We have more than 250 forts within our fold across the country. Now, their geographic distribution may vary, and yes, of course, statistics would indicate that the states like Maharashtra, states like Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, sorry, Madhya Pradesh, some of the states would have a larger concentration of these forts, and some of the states wouldn't have as many number of forts. So it has to do with geopolitics, and accordingly the numbers are there. And I think ASI is protecting maximum forts or fortifications from these 8 or 9 states. Not that others we are not, but these are the maximum. These are the states with maximum number that we have. And now, from my point of view, from ASI's point of view, they are all nationally protected monuments, or forts, or fortification walls, watchtowers, whatever that they are. And because I'm calling them nationally protected, it means that the statutes of our Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act of 1958 and its amendment in 2010 are applicable on them. So not only the forts or the fortification, but we are also in a way responsible for the buffers of these forts also, that sort of standard cordon of 300 meters around any monument. And therefore, we are also duty bound to look into their conservation, preservation, and maintain their status quo. So that is how it is. And as far as conservation practice is concerned, I don't think it varies. Part of your question indicate whether it varies in different parts of India and how or why. It doesn't vary. We are, Red Fort is important to us, but then Diu is also important to us, or Janhwij is also important to us. So all forts which are, or all monuments for that matter, which are nationally important monuments are important to us, because they're all national emblems in a way. In fact, our conservation policy calls them national treasures, so as to say. So that is how it is. But the geographic variation that one may come across is on account of the geographic variation in geopolitical situations. I think that's my answer to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. So I think that was the perspective for the nationally protected monuments. But we have so many other sites, and Shikha ji, you have been working in very different parts of India. What is your perspective about this? What is the status for both? I mean, the protected and the non-protected ones.
Thanks, Ashish. I mean, this is a very relevant question that you've asked and close to my heart. So I'll first, start on the status itself in terms of numbers, because, when we started the NSC Fort, our first, focus was how many fortifications are there, till we don't even know what we are dealing with, at least we should know the quantity. And like you said, the heritage value, which is so important. So what is the number, and then what is the range in terms of value is what we need to do, and then how many are protected, and then what is the conservation approach. So I remember about 2 years back when I had done this paper as NSC Fort for an intact publication on conservation, we calculated the number of protected forts, which was easy to look at the ASI list and the state archaeology, and there are about 255 ASI protected forts and 245 state protected forts. So at least one is assured that those 500 have, legal protection. But I remember, I mean, a lot of people, like even international experts would ask me, so what is the quantum of forts, you know? And we had no clue. And we even amongst our members thought we could start mapping, but we had some vague numbers, 250 here and there. So I was really pleased, like this year, I want to show you this publication, which says 4,000 plus fortifications. And this is by, you know, Sri Pramod Mande, who is known as the Durg Maharishi, you know, like he's like the leader of forts, you know, the saint of forts. A gentleman historian from Maharashtra who is no more, but fortunately some of us like Rima ji and I, and of course all our Maharashtrian NSC members, they had the fortune of actually meeting him, and we actually could, you know, go around with him looking at the Maharashtra forts. And we used to ask him, you know, when would he publish? Because out of these 4,000, it's actually 4,088 forts listed here with the coordinates. And out of those, 1,888 are visited by him. And then 2 others who wrote the book after him, they've added. But what it does is, I mean, for us as NSC Fort, it gives us the number, it gives us the location of all forts, and we can now go on verifying. It even says where there could be a remain, but there is no remain. So at least we know there is, you know, archaeological remain in that area. So just to quickly, you know, tell you the numbers, I mean, approximately, you know, 12% of our forts are protected. If we say from 4,088 to, you know, 500 are protected. So around 12% protected, but I would say about an additional 8%, especially knowing Rajasthan and the number of heritage hotels we have, because out of total heritage hotels across India, 90% are in Rajasthan. And most of them are conversions, you know, adaptive reuse of forts. So I would add another 8% giving credit there. So we could say, okay, 20%, even like some in Gujarat, you know, private forts are in good condition, like in Baroda. So we could say, okay, 20% of our forts, including nationally protected, state protected, and private owned, would be in a fair state of protection, and they are following conservation in some way or the other. Of course, ASI is a national policy, which we also now advise the state government to follow. And some of the state government forts are following that, like in the hill forts of Rajasthan. And the private forts, you know, they have their own views as heritage hotels. They may sometimes make a modification that would not be preferable to us. So those, of course, some of them are model examples, but like, you know, you have Nagaur and Mehrangarh, which are recognized internationally too. But at some places, there are interventions that you would not like to happen. So it varies in there. And of course, from state to state, the conservation approach changes because of the culture that is there, because of the local material, the technology available. So obviously the conservation methodology will change. But in my experience, when I worked in Rajasthan, of course, they already had a tradition, you know, of working with lime, and there were craftspeople available. When we worked in Punjab on the 21 monuments, there were a number of forts which were covered, including Qila Mubarak and, you know, smaller ones like Mani Majra near Chandigarh. And they had the knowledge of lime and construct, you know, using that, but the lime there was of a different quality. And they did not have, you know, very skilled craftsmen for some of the Qila Mubarak details. So that's where you see they engaged again with Rajasthan craftspeople and artisans who were brought in. In Vijayawada and Kondapalli, it was totally different because they had no clue. They had never done any conservation before. So actually, it's really dependent on the good contractor, how that contractor is willing to learn. And he really mobilized, you know, himself, got the line thing done. And we, again, our engineer was from Rajasthan who came and who actually demonstrated how the work should be done, but they carried on fine. So it's sort of, you know, this training then sort of spreads over and one can learn more. And of course, in terms of quantum, it's already said, Maharashtra has about 628 forts, out of which 78 are protected. Rajasthan is second, has 571. Then you also, actually UP, Uttar Pradesh is the second with 571. Then Rajasthan, 551. And Madhya Pradesh, and the fifth one is Karnataka. So these are our 5 big states with, you know, fortifications more than 450 plus, 450 to 650. And then if we have cases like Mizoram and all, you only have like 3 forts. you only have 6 forts. Even the book that I was showing you, it's, very few numbers are limited. And of course, then they are less protected. So that's, I think, sort of summarizes what I want to say.
It sounds like an ocean of opportunities for those who want to work on the fortification heritage. But let me go back to Rima ji, because Rajasthan clearly emerges, as a very good caretaker of lot of forts. Rima ji, can you please unmute yourself? And what's your perspective as an also from the archaeological background? What's your perspective about the forts?
Muted by the host. Okay, I'm unmuted now. Thank you. You used the word caretaker, and that's exactly what I am today. I'm also the Kiledar of Jaigarh Fort. I'm the director of the fort, and I spent most of the day doing long distance remote management. What I will do is continue to hold the magnifying glass to focus on Rajasthan and add to what Shalini and Janhwij and Shikha have just said. And that is that when we think of Rajasthan, we always think of the larger forts, the hill forts, the World Heritage, but there are also a large number of very tiny gadis, small forts, which are nothing more than an fortified space with a temple within it, within a palace within it. And these are not even on the list when we consider them. The people who live there will consider them as their forts, but the vast majority will know them as forts, which we don't take them into our accounting. I'm sorry, I can only hear my own echoes. There are also garrison forts, which we no longer think of except academically. And straight off, you have almost a square pattern. So Shekhawati has a lot of these garrison forts, which came up in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, like Lakshmangarh, or like Ranoli. But then, of course, there are, as I said earlier, the well-known ones. So Nagaur, Jodhpur, Bikaner, the World Heritage Site forts. And with them, the value is what we ascribe them, of course. That's a very kind of dicey topic to go to. Most are not protected. I keep hearing an echo. I don't know if most are not protected, and many are in phases of reuse. Phases of reuse, I mean, from being a local school to being the local thana in Fatehpur Shekhawati, to being hotels, to being other things. So there again, the level of protection might be from the state or from some other private body even, or the local panchayat samiti, but it is varied and it is various and it is often vague. And I think that is one of the things we need to address collectively across the country, that where we are not finding very obvious remains of forts, what has been incorporated. So one of the other things in Rajasthan is old temples, which got fortified very early on in their life history, and in a sense fit into what is a fortification. And we need to look at things like that also more seriously. I'm going to stop there and let you go on to the next question, Ashish.
Well, I think it gives a good overview. Now, of course, we have a lot of fortification heritage. So what is that we are lacking? Let's be frank and find out why is there so little representation of fortified heritage on the World Heritage list? Let me begin from the top. And what is the potential of listing these sites? We have so many numbers, and what is the potential? Is there a gap because the stakeholders do not propose such sites or are not aware of the OUVs, the outstanding universal values that we have? So what is that we should probably be looking at? In terms of non-protected, the sites which are not really having kind of protection from the legal aspects, and also the focus of the outstanding values that it possesses. Let me begin by asking to Shikha ji. Maybe she gave a very good overview of what the national statistics are.
Can you
can't hear you?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Ashish, I think, after getting the hill forts of Rajasthan inscribed and also looking at other potential fortifications, like I said, we have so many of them. And if we really look at the ICOMOS, global strategy, gap analysis, I mean, UNESCO's global strategy and ICOMOS gap analysis of 2004, fortifications is an overrepresented category currently on the World Heritage List. I mean, maybe not for India because like we have so many and so few are there, but across the world, there is enough, you know, on the World Heritage List. And when we are looking at our forts and we are saying they qualify for outstanding universal value, then we have to compare them with fortifications across the globe. And they have to have something that any of the others do not have. You know, something beyond what even our own hill forts or the Mughal forts, Red Fort and all maybe don't have, and there is an extra value there. So in that sense, we really need to work on a thematic framework ourselves, maybe as NSC Fort, and look at the potentials of each fort and see where they stand. I feel there is some potential, you know, in terms of military landscape. Maybe, you know, one could look at Maharashtra because it has a very unique, you know, physiography with the coast and the hills as well as the ground together. So, you know, the combination and the military network that was used by, you know, Shivaji Maharaj for the guerrilla warfare. So I feel there may be a situation there for a serial nomination. Janhwij already presented the Deccan forts, which are again, you know, could be a very good serial nomination, potentially if we are able to prove the outstanding universal value. And then there are some individual forts, you know, which could just qualify on their own also. It could, like there's some excellent ones in Punjab and in Madhya Pradesh, I would say. But we really need to bring up that study and say how they qualify and give something which is, you know, currently not there in our current World Heritage List, as well as on the global World Heritage List.
Let me go back to Janhwij sir. I mean, the same question to you also. There is a little representation in terms of World Heritage. I mean, we have numbers of sites protected with ASI, and it has got regional variations as well. We recently got the serial nomination for Rajasthan, but what do you think about this? You know, even the unprotected ones.
I think Shikha has given an elaborate overview on the fortifications and their potential nominations. And when I was working on this presentation and whatever I've handled of World Heritage matters within ASI, even though 3 or 4 already on the World Heritage list, but we have already, you know, the dossier on the Deccan Sultanate, which includes the forts, Bidar, Gulbarga, Golconda, and parts of Bijapur. They're already sort of, you know, they're being nominated. That dossier, I think, it was prepared by the state government in consultation with ASI, that was state government of Karnataka and Telangana. And then NGO was involved in the preparation of the dossier. So it does demonstrate the outstanding value, and that's where, you know, when we assess that fort and dossier. I take the point what Shikha has said, that yes, it's an overrepresented category, but from the point of view of India as a state party, I think some of the forts do deserve to be on the list, and definitely the ones from Maharashtra, what she has pointed out, you know, in my opinion, also should be there on the list. But as she pointed out, there could be other sort of set of serial nominations, because the advantage in serial nomination is that you're in one sweep, you're getting more numbers in one go itself. You know, for example, forts like Janhwij Fort, Vellore, even St. Angelo's, even some of the Goa forts, your forts in George and Fort William, even though Fort William is under army occupation. Then forts like Kalinjar and Rohtas in Patna, some of them are absolutely outstanding in their own ways. Now, of course, there has to be a storyline to demonstrate the outstanding universal value, because, you know, we may think that something is outstanding, but as long as we are able to sort of demonstrate it through a value set and the attributes, I mean, that exercise, of course, needs to be done. But I think there could be others also which could be on the list. At the other level, even though that's an exercise perhaps that needs to be done when we look at this tentative list augmentation, that even some of the existing ones, if there's a possibility of converting them into serial nomination. So for example, I mean, it's a deviation from force that if Patadakal, we are proposing an extension at some point in time and including Badami and Aihole. We did for obviously Brideshwara to add other two temple sites. So maybe we could review, and add more to the existing list, provided that it contributes or it establishes the OUV of the entire serial. So there could be other potential such serial nominations that could be worked out. But yes, more and more that you put on the list would add to the challenge of demonstrating those individual sort of outstanding values to it. But anyways, that's an exercise worth attempting, in my opinion.
Oh, that's like a real good news. I think we have some new dossiers coming up from this category, and also the sites being the series is probably a wonderful opportunity that we should look into.
Well, just to interrupt you here, then I think your ICOFORT Scientific Committee, I think, can play a pivotal role in this.
We'll all be, certainly we'll all be happy to contribute whenever. I think let's hear it from Rimaji. What do you think? Let's give a.
So this is a complicated thing of why so little, for the World Heritage Sites. Now, what happens is World Heritage becomes something very romantic in the eyes of the average person. Each time we have a site inscribed, the whole country is thrilled. At least I think the whole country is. But World Heritage committees have their own criteria. In fact, I would even use the word limitations about what can fit in, as Shikhaji just said. So yes, there is vast potential in our forts and fortifications and the ancillary aspects that we are probably not even looking at in the same way as several countries had. You mentioned barracks early on. A lot of the European countries have focused on that, on more recent things. So yes, what else can we think about if we think out of the box? Should we have other categories other than World Heritage Site categories? And does that give us a different way of validating the importance of our forts? Now, I'm not saying we do away with World Heritage Sites, obviously. We're not going to do that. And Janhwij has just mentioned the ones which are up for potential, they're already on the tentative list or should be. So what else can we be looking at? Well, that is something for us to consider. Maybe even region-wise, and I don't mean as within regions of a country, but globally, other ways of putting lists together. You also have this aspect of what about the stakeholders? Is that one of the reasons we can't kind of get our act together, if you can allow that informally? Yes, there are many stakeholders, and that is one of the issues when it comes to having meeting all the criteria for World Heritage committees. But then so is the aspect of an outstanding universal value. Now, you can always find some criteria that fit, but then as Shikhaji also explained, that how do you then fit your comparative analysis with other parts of the world? So again, what can we do? How can we identify other things where we are not looking so much at just fitting the bill of WHS, but of something else? Now, management, of course, is an issue we need to consider, because mostly when we are thinking of forts, we are thinking of something which is we have allowed to go to rack and ruin, and then we rescue it, and then it becomes either a hotel or an ideal piece of conservation with a lot of input from many people and many organizations. Or it just, again, continues to just deteriorate. How are we going to practically find ways that take it forward? So that is one of the challenges. Thank you.
Shalini ji, what do you think? I mean, is it only the values, or how do the people behave and they react to the fortification heritage? And what's your view about this?
Ashish, I'll take what Rima ji just said. I'll take that one step forward, and I'll talk about the the stakeholders actually. So if we look at the number of forts and fortifications that we are talking about, the World Heritage tag that we have or the World Heritage status, which gets applied to, is mostly either state protected or national protected monuments. Shikha gave us the numbers that there are so many unprotected forts and fortifications still, besides, there's a big number of so there is this, it is, this is also something that we need to think about, or maybe take this further as to how those forts and fortifications, how do we, probably we need to change the mindset of people, because there is, I've read a number of articles where people, there was one article where I read that it was called UNESCO-ization of, because people kind of also look at this tag of World Heritage is also like a burden. It brings opportunities. It also brings responsibilities. So I don't know, maybe our NSC Fort can play a pivotal role there, and maybe, it can also advocate, and it can also kind of educate people about the status of, so right now there are a lot of private properties which Rima ji said they get converted into hotels, and they get into very different kind of, because after all these people, these properties, they are all looking for economic returns, So a lot of these properties are still being used by the royalties, still being used by people belonging to the royal family, and they do not want to put it, so this question that you asked, that, why is it not being represented as a World Heritage Site, is somewhere, I think we can look at that aspect also, as to people, maybe it's the mindset of people, and especially where the private owners are the stakeholders. That's a different.
Very well said, Shalini ji. I think that also triggers a lot of other thoughts, but I think we are overshooting our time today. But quickly, probably would really go back to Rima ji, also as a Vice President of ICOMOS. What should be our vision for fortification heritage, for the future of fortification?
Look, I think we definitely need to understand what happens in forts much more. So right from the materials that are used to create forts in different places to what is happening once a fort is created. We then need to be mapping the secondary levels of defense. Examine why we have a fort at all and where we have it also. I'm going quickly. Also look at the battlefields, at known battlefields near forts. So again, geographically, what is happening? That makes a certain action near a fort. What are the habitations that have been there over time? Very often in any part of India, in any type of structure that we study, any type of monument that we study or archaeological site we look at, there has been occupation or reoccupation, not necessarily by the same people, but definitely reoccupation over time. So looking at the battlefields and the occupation levels. Also, we need much more, and especially within our NSC, but across the country for universities, colleges, document the bastions, battlements, garrison posts, the barracks, all of the ancillary aspects much more fully than just a handful of us can do. Also, we need to document the forts which are in private hands and in government other than government protected hands, because there are things in, for example, Devasthan or Devasthanam equivalent, which will not be in the same level when we look at archaeological sites and the Department of Archaeology sites. Also, what might be intriguing is to study the process of deterioration. Now, I say this because again, going back to Shekhawati, so there are forts which were physically destroyed, like they took a cannon and they bombarded forts in the 19th century as a way of punishment. So you can see each time I would go past the fort of Beri near Navalgarh, you would see another bastion about to collapse. We need to look at that also. It will help us in a certain way. Almost through, because I don't want to take up everybody's time. Continue the work of that the NSC Forts has been doing on, on glossary of terms used, descriptive terms, military terms in different languages, more of the documentation. Also, let's be more ambitious and go on for a national register of forts and fort remains and fortification remains. So that would cover archaeological through to almost present times. That is more recent military architecture, 20th century, World War I, World War II. We don't have that many, but the Northeast needed them, particularly during the Second World War. So again, to look at what kind of fortifications were quickly set up. Okay, I've taken my fair share, but before I sort of go away, I'd like to say how thrilled I've been to have been part of all of this, and over to the rest of my colleagues to hear their terms. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rimaji. I think that was wonderful. Shikhaji, we have Shikhaji's perspective on future, the vision.
So, I mean, there's just a lot of work for us to do, I feel. But of course, yeah, I mean, mapping, documenting, protecting, conserving, and, interpretation. So there's so much to do for so many forts. 4,000 we are just talking about in the country, but then we have other additional military attributes like the cantonments, or, we are not even counting the cities with the fortified walls. So that again adds a lot, a different category. But 2 points that I would like to emphasize that, our NSC Fort should really look at. One is scientific conservation, because we've seen, even in case of Rajasthan, in the best of their efforts, when the state government was conserving some forts, they were actually, modifying the loophole shape while putting lime plaster on it. So that kind of understanding, and this is something like even the historian I was talking about, Pramod Mande sir, observed during his site, and he asked me, why are they doing it, in a particular fort? So fort is not like, just another building where you start using traditional materials. We have to get into the defense attributes, how they function, and they have to be conserved as per that. So scientific conservation. And second is, the interpretation. So like the forts, I would say the forts tails and trails. If we can develop a fort circuit for, using and interpreting it for children, for all spheres of people, academicians, researchers, children, families, and create fort circuits. And for this, I would say ICOFORT. Now, I want to just clarify, because there has been a mix of ICOFORT and NSC Fort a number of times. So I want to clarify, since I also represent ICOFORT, which is the International Scientific Committee on Fortifications. That is the International Scientific Committee with ECOMAS International. And we are a national scientific committee, which is called NSC Fort. So our NSC Fort can learn a lot from the ICOFORT structure, the way they do scientific conservation in different parts. They have a team of experts. We can have an exchange with them, and we've already done that before. And also this networking and trails of fort, or how to promote it for tourism and interpretation, or even for locals to value, because that is what, like the quantum of forts we have, it needs to be an indigenous community level approach that will finally save them.
Thank you, Shikhaji. That was the perspective also from the International Scientific Committee, the ICOFORT. And let's hear from Shalini ji, who has also been part of the International Committee on Documentation. A lot of panelists are saying documentation is one very good tool. What are your views and vision?
Ashish, I would like to, Shikha has put a big task for all the NSC members. I would like to, before we get on to doing all that humongous task, I had listed down a few things that as NSC Fort, members of NSC Fort should be able to put these smaller things together which should be maybe there as part of a library of NSC Fort, which as a ready reckoner, if anybody wants. So I had put down these 2-3 things. One is, of course, I thought while when you look at the internet and you kind of come across so many books and so many researches which have been done. So it would be interesting that if we can put down our efforts to also have a bibliography of all the kind of research which has already been done, maybe region wise, So if we can have, so it's there as a ready reckoner for anybody who's researching, anybody who's studying, visiting, can kind of, use it as a. So one is the bibliography, and of course the glossary is anyway there on our, cards, that we want to do glossary of terms. Of course, again, region-wise and different thing. So that is something. Of course, Shikha has mentioned that listing of forts. Also, I think we should kind of have it available on our, because as experts on maybe as a national scientific committee of forts, if somebody wants to do any work on forts, I think we should have these kind of smaller information available on our NSC Forts website or page that we have within the e-commerce structure. The other thing I wanted to say is that when we are doing the scientific studies for various forts, I think now that there are different lot of these international working groups which have also kind of started emerging in the arena of e-commerce. So it would be interesting to actually link, and EcoFort could work very well hand in hand with water and heritage, because water is a very intrinsic part of it, component of any fortification. Or so I think water and heritage, similarly climate change and heritage, I think these are two working groups with which we can work very closely, take up case studies that we are talking of, various fort, so many these young people are working on. So these issues also can be looked at within, when we are looking at. And of course, I would also like to emphasize that it will be interesting that if we can align, now that ICOMOS has put down a strategic plan and we have identified certain thematic areas. So water and heritage and climate change actually fall within those thematic areas. And if we can also, the 3 action areas that we have identified, if our activities can also get aligned to those action areas of knowledge building and archiving, which we are anyway, attempting, advisory and of course advocacy and outreach, which kind of also will happening with all the publications and all the works that is happening within that. So these are my views that maybe NSC Fort can take forward.
Thank you. That's a lot of work we all have to do, NSC team. Let's hear it from Mr. Sharma, your views on the vision for the fortification heritage, please.
I think most has been said. So essentially what I may say, perhaps maybe a repetition, and my answer, or rather remarks, would be strikingly similar to what Shikha has already said. Now, I look at it at 2 or 3 different levels. It was astounding to see that publication, which indicates 4,088 forts and fortresses or gadis and other aspects related to forts and fortification. That's an amazing work that has happened. Though I wonder whether that is entirely a primary survey or a secondary survey or a combination of both. But that is something which is worth pursuing. And if NSC Fort looks at it, and because you've got members across the country, so maybe you could do region-wise inventories and see what's the situation on ground. I thought that was something I would like to add to it. I would still repeat one thing. I would still say that essentially when we are talking about forts, we are largely in our minds, the images that we have or that we conjure are that of the later medieval forts. We don't look earlier than that. And I attempted to give a very sort of select examples, whether Rajgir or Cyclopean Wall or Malhar or Kaushambi and other sites. Now, I also spoke about obviously Sisupargarh. So one perhaps has to go back in time, and it may give us certain vital clues about how the evolution of fortification, fort architecture took place in India or in the Indian subcontinent. Worth pursuing that sort of a line chronology and line of evolution. And so we go beyond or earlier than the medieval forts, and also look at the fortified settlements. That is the point what Shikha also made, because almost every medieval city in India is basically fortified. It has fortification. It has those security, those controlled gates or gateways. So that's something. I don't know whether NSC Forts looks into that as well. As far as the conservation goes, of course, we are looking at multiple levels of protection. So obviously, if ASI is protecting 250 odd forts, then we follow our own norms of conservation and our own policy. Shikha mentioned that several states have adapted ASI's policy on conservation, and that is what is being followed. But the vast number of forts, fortresses, and other such structures, or fortified havelis, if I may say so, they do whatever they please to. Now, of course, if the owner is sensitive enough, he or she does a good job out of it. But if it's not, then kind of changes that are made to the structure sometimes are not very sort of welcoming. So that is an area of concern. And usually, Shikha, if that's happening, that vast sort of number of unprotected forts which are being subject to reuse, somewhere tourism has a role to play. So they are obviously promoting schemes which is making people convert their forts into heritage sort of guest houses or hotels and things like that. So maybe an interface between ICOMOS and tourism and culture, ASI, whoever you think is appropriate, should be there to come up with some sort of some charter or guidelines as to if a reuse to be done. What is that common minimum program that they must follow in order to ensure that the integrity is not compromised with, and a constant engagement with stakeholders is necessary. Realizing some of the forts, they're occupying such a vast stretch of land. You have multiple stakeholders who are operating on that. Of course, if they are protected, then ASI or the state archaeology. But then you would have forest department, you would have army or military, or the cantonments as you mentioned, or the panchayats or the communities who are living within or around these forts. So there could be multiple stakeholders that need to be engaged with. And Shalini's point is very well articulated, that it's not only the forts, then there are other related subjects or areas also to look into. If Shikha is looking at force as sort of military landscape, she's interpreting the whole thing at a very different level. So in that case, several of your national scientific committees perhaps should or can come together in order to have a sort of a very holistic overview or perspective. In fact, I was just looking at some of these remarks also in Facebook, and Tejas Garge, who's the state director for Maharashtra, he made a very interesting point. He said National Register is a good idea, and maybe ASI can take a lead. Yes, maybe we can, and I think you're aware of the fact that there is a National Mission on Monuments and Antiquities, and they have also done a listing. INTAC has also done a listing, which is all available online as well. So maybe that could also be one reference point to begin with. So the publication that you mentioned, and then this National Mission could be two excellent resources. And to end my point, I definitely would like to see more and more forts on the World Heritage List. As long as I'm holding this charge, it's always my wish that as many sites, even though there's a limitation of 1 per year, but as many sites, including forts, should be on the World Heritage List from India. So I hope in next 3 to 4 to 5 years, there should be more forts added onto the list as a serial nomination or whatever it is. I think that is what I would like to say.
Right. I think that's really encouraging, and also you had already exhibited a lot of varieties of fortification heritage that we have, the landscapes around, and it's kind of a challenge before us to document all this. I think this has been a wonderful session. A number of questions are also written on different platforms. Probably it's not really the time. We were already delayed in terms of timeline today, but one interesting one was about the living heritage. So fortification and the living heritage associated with it, it also should be documented if anybody wants to take up this particular aspect. Shikhaji, please.
I think this question was raised by Smita Makhija, and I just entered the thing. But I mean, living heritage is very important. And when we were, nominating hill forts of Rajasthan, it is one of the attributes that we show. So the 6 hill forts of Rajasthan, one of the attributes was that they have the settlement, structure within. And in fact, out of them, the 6, Jaisalmer is inscribed because of its urban living heritage. So, it's definitely an attribute that we understand is important for our folks.
Can I add to that, please, Ashish?
Please do. Please do.
Okay, so the living heritage part is essential. It's crucial. Even I was doing my PhD, I was actually looking at ethnoarchaeology along with archaeology. So I want to just sound the cautionary note here, which is never to assume that there has been an unbroken existence of humans there, and that we are direct descendants of people who were. I know we don't, but I do want to kind of emphasize it, and therefore we cannot always go back to the current people, or not always is what I'm saying. Sometimes you can, and then expect them to be the best judges of what is to be done with that site. We don't do it, but I just want to kind of overemphasize something, lean over backwards, so to speak. Thanks.
Thank you. I think thank you also to conservation architect Smita Makhija for this interesting question. I think we don't have much time for most of the questions. We will respond back to all those queries on Facebook chat box or by email later on. I would now like to invite our co-coordinator Archana Deshmukh to please give a note of thanks and validity for this session today. Thank you all the panelists for being with us today. And it has been really encouraging for the NSC committee. We have a long way to go and we all need your supports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashish, for this wonderful program and for inviting me in.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Archana.
Thank you, Ashish, and thank you, our esteemed panel members and our keynote speaker today. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, that was extensive. And, looking at all the presentations and the discussions, we know that we have a lot of challenges and equal opportunities when it comes to fort and fortified heritage. And I would like to give a vote of thanks to everyone, but just a little bit information about ICOMOS India. ICOMOS India is an advisory body to UNESCO, and we have more than 350 participants and members under this umbrella. We have around 21 NSCs, which works on different specific fields, comes under heritage. And our NSC works under forts and fortified heritage, but this not just forts and fortified heritage, but it also comes with the battlefields, the harbors, naval battlefields, military engineering, arsenals, barracks, testing fields, and other enclaves and construction built or which were used for military or defensive purposes. This also comes, our NSC works on military artillery as well. Our vision is we are a team of around 33 members right now. We all are volunteers. We have some of the very esteemed members and our gurus who are in our team, who constantly guide us and try to push us to work better towards heritage and fortified heritage. And we work towards to create a national database on fortifications and its variations, of course, and with regional context of by glossary and inventory, because we have such a rich heritage spread all across India with its regional ethnicity, and these regions and these states come together to form a glossary which would be even more wide in terms to understand the local perspective of building this kind of heritage, and also to allow people's participation in the same. We also make a case for bringing out significance of fortification in urban and cultural landscape in terms of heritage context. Also, we encourage research to write and publish more about vast fortified and military heritage, sites, structures, arms, ammunitions, and technologies. So this is basically our vision and how we work. And now I would like to, say a few words about our sessions. The whole webinar was parted into 5 sessions, and this is our last session of finale. And we have almost covered pan India in terms of right from Jammu, central region of UP, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, then Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Goa, and today we covered southern and eastern part of fortification. And I sincerely thank all the participants, all the speakers to put forth their study, put forth their research, sharing with us their views and their ideas towards heritage. I also thank all our keynote speakers who contributed to this session, and they took this precious time out of their schedule. And from the first session to this session, we had wonderful keynote speakers, right from Janhwij Sharma ji, who are our keynote speaker today, then Rima ji, then we had Tejas Gargeji from Maharashtra, and also for the panel discussion, and also Amitaji Beg we had for the central session. I sincerely thank all of you. One more thing is, this session is, it was not planned overnight. The drums started rolling long back, since few weeks from now. And it needs a bird's eye and, an eye for detail. And I sincerely thank you to Dr. Shikha Jain for her constant push and, a betterment to make this session a successful one. Also, to make sure that every keynote speaker has some time for this particular session to share their insights about fort and fortifications. And all my wonderful team members, our backhand tech support, Kuwar Yash Singh, Yash Pratap Singh, and Ashish Trambadia, our coordinator, all wonderful members, young members like Priya and all others. Our guru, Dr. Rima Hooja, who gave her, very important comments to design this whole program. And thank you very much once again. I also would like to say one more thing, that this session has put forth some wonderful and fresh study and research, and NSC Fort, we hope to bring out one in the form of publication as a series paper. So all the best, all the members. Thank you very much for all the viewers and participants. Thank you once again.
Thank you to you, Archana, also. And
Thank
the
you,
President
Ashish.
ICOMOS India has already commented on the chat box. He says a publication should come out.
Yes,
So with that
yes.
note, I
Kudos.
thank everybody again, along with Archana,
Thank you, Ashish.
and
Thank you for the
hope for the
wonderful.
more such sessions in future. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bye-bye. Thank you.